Single Dad found a woman beaten by the road, then realized she was the CEO who once saved his family. Luke Warren never expected that stopping on a foggy midnight highway would change everything. The broken woman he pulled from the darkness wasn't just any stranger. She was Grace Lennox, the billionaire CEO who'd anonymously saved his daughter's life 3 years ago. Now she lay bleeding in his arms, running from forces that wanted her dead. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The fog rolled thick across Highway 14 like a living thing, swallowing the yellow lines and turning the world into nothing but Luke Warren's headlights cutting through gray soup. It was 12:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. He knew because he'd glanced at the clock when he left Morrison's auto shop, his hands still smelling like motor oil and brake fluid despite washing them 3 times. The late shift paid time and a half, and with Maddie's birthday coming up, every extra dollar mattered. Luke was bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that settled into your spine after 10 hours of crawling under cars and wrestling with rusted bolts. His 2003 Ford pickup rattled over the uneven asphalt, the heater barely working, and he was mentally calculating whether he had enough in the account for the new winter coat Maddie needed when something caught his eye. At first he thought it was a deer. The shape was wrong, though, too angular, too still. He eased off the gas, squinting through the mist. His headlights swept across the guardrail, and his breath caught in his throat. It was a person. "Jesus Christ," Luke muttered, slamming on the brakes. The truck skidded slightly on the damp road before lurching to a stop on the shoulder. He threw it into park, grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment, and jumped out into the cold October air. The wind hit him immediately, cutting through his worn flannel jacket like it wasn't there. His boots crunched on gravel as he ran toward the figure. The flashlight beam bounced wildly, and as he got closer, his stomach turned. It was a woman, crumpled against the metal guardrail like someone had thrown her there. Her body was twisted at an unnatural angle, one arm pinned beneath her, the other stretched out on the cold ground. No shoes. Her feet were bare and bloody, scratched to hell like she'd been running through broken glass. Her clothes, what was left of them, were torn and dirty. A blouse that might have been white once was now streaked with mud and blood. Her face was turned away, hidden under a curtain of dark hair matted with dirt and what looked like dried blood. "Ma'am?" Luke called out, his voice cracking. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. The only sound was the wind and the distant hum of his truck's engine. He dropped to his knees beside her, his flashlight shaking in his hand. Up close, it was worse. So much worse. Her face was a mess of bruises, deep purple and black marks that spread across her cheekbone and jaw. Her lip was split and swollen. There was a gash above her eyebrow, dried blood crusted around it. Her hands were scraped raw, fingernails broken and bleeding like she'd clawed at something, or someone. Hey, I'm here to help," Luke said, forcing his voice to steady even though his heart was hammering against his ribs. "Can you hear me? I'm going to call 911, okay? Just hang on." He reached for his phone, his fingers fumbling, when the woman's eyes suddenly fluttered open. Luke jerked back in surprise. Her eyes were gray, steel gray, and even through the swelling and the pain written all over her face, they locked onto him with an intensity that made him forget to breathe for a second. She stared at him like she was trying to figure out if he was real or another nightmare. "It's okay," Luke said quickly, holding up his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm Luke. I saw you from the road. We need to get you help." The woman's mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. Then barely a whisper. "Please." "I've got you," Luke said. "I'm going to get you out of here." He pulled off his jacket without thinking and draped it over her shoulders. She was shivering violently, her whole body trembling like a leaf in a storm. Her skin was ice cold to the touch. How long had she been out here? An hour? 2? In this weather, it was a miracle she was still alive. Luke dialed 911, pressing the phone between his ear and shoulder as he tried to assess her injuries. The operator picked up on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? I'm on Highway 14, about 10 miles south of Millbrook, Luke said quickly. I found a woman on the side of the road. She's hurt bad, beaten up, looks like. She's conscious, but barely. I need an ambulance right now. Is she breathing normally? Yeah, but she's freezing and... Luke looked down at the woman again. Her eyes were starting to close. Hey, stay with me. Don't close your eyes." The operator's voice was calm, professional. "Sir, can you tell if she's bleeding from any major wounds?" Luke scanned her body with the flashlight. There was blood, but he couldn't tell where it was all coming from. Her head, definitely. Her hands. Maybe her side. Her blouse was torn there, and the fabric looked darker. "I think she's got a head wound and maybe something on her side. I don't know, there's a lot of blood." "Okay, help is on the way. Can you ask her name? Try to keep her talking." Luke looked down at the woman. Her eyes were open again, but they were unfocused, staring past him into the fog. "Ma'am, what's your name?" he asked gently. "Can you tell me your name?" She didn't respond at first, then her lips moved again, and he had to lean in close to hear her. "Run," she whispered. "You need to run." "What? No, I'm not leaving you. Help is coming." "They'll come back." Her voice was barely audible, each word seeming to cost her. "Not safe." A chill ran down Luke's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "Who'll come back? Who did this to you?" But she'd gone quiet again, her eyes drifting closed. "Stay with me," Luke said urgently. He looked around at the empty highway, suddenly very aware of how isolated they were. The fog had gotten thicker, reducing visibility to maybe 20 feet in any direction. If someone had done this to her, if they were still out here, he pushed the thought away. The woman needed help, and he wasn't about to leave her out here like garbage. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Luke had never been so relieved to hear that sound in his life. "You hear that?" he said to the woman. "That's help coming. You're going to be okay." The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later, lights cutting through the fog like red and white strobes. 2 paramedics jumped out, a woman with short blonde hair and a guy who looked barely old enough to have graduated high school. They had a stretcher and medical bags, and they moved with the kind of practiced efficiency that came from years of emergencies. "What have we got?" the woman asked, kneeling beside Luke. "Found her like this about 10 minutes ago," Luke said, moving back to give them room. "She's been in and out of consciousness. Looks like she was beaten. She said something about people coming back, but I don't know what she meant." The male paramedic was checking her pulse and shining a light in her eyes. "Pupils are reactive but sluggish. Possible concussion, multiple contusions and lacerations. BP's low. We need to get her warm and get fluids in her." They worked quickly, wrapping her in thermal blankets and carefully loading her onto the stretcher. Luke stood back, watching, his jacket still draped over her shoulders. He felt useless suddenly, like he should be doing more but didn't know what. "You riding with her?" the female paramedic asked as they wheeled the stretcher toward the ambulance. Yeah, I'll follow in my truck," Luke said. "We're taking her to Millbrook Regional. You saved her life, you know. Another hour out here and she would have died from exposure." The words hit Luke harder than he expected. He nodded, unable to speak past the sudden lump in his throat. As they loaded her into the ambulance, the woman's hand slipped out from under the blanket. Luke caught a glimpse of something that made him pause. A watch on her wrist. Or what was left of one. The crystal was shattered, the band torn, but even in its broken state, he could tell it was expensive. Really expensive. The kind of thing you didn't see often in a town like Millbrook. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the vehicle pulled away, sirens wailing back to life. Luke stood there for a moment in the dissipating flashing lights, the fog swirling around him before heading back to his truck. His hands were shaking as he started the engine. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a bone-deep weariness and 1,000 questions he couldn't answer. Who was she? What had happened to her? And why did she look so terrified when she told him to run? He followed the ambulance's taillights through the fog, his mind racing. Millbrook Regional Hospital was a squat brick building that had seen better days, but it was the only hospital for 30 miles in any direction. Luke parked in the emergency lot and hurried inside, his boots squeaking on the linoleum floor. The ER waiting room was mostly empty at this hour, just an old man with a cough and a young woman holding a fussy baby. The fluorescent lights were too bright after the darkness of the highway, making Luke squint as he approached the reception desk. "I came in with the woman they just brought in," he told the nurse behind the counter, "from Highway 14. The nurse, a heavy-set woman with tired eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun, looked up from her computer. Are you family? No, I'm the one who found her. I just want to know if she's okay. I'm sorry, sir, but we can only release information to family members. Luke ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. She doesn't have anyone. She was alone out there. I need to know she's alive. The nurse's expression softened slightly. The doctors are with her now. That's all I can tell you. You'll need to have a seat. Luke was about to argue when a voice called out from down the hallway. Sir? Excuse me, sir? He turned to see a police officer walking toward him, a woman in her mid-30s with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and sharp eyes that took in everything. Her name tag read Detective Ramirez. You're the one who called it in? She asked. Yeah, Luke Warren. I'm Detective Anna Ramirez. I need to ask you some questions about what you saw tonight. Luke's stomach tightened. Am I in trouble? No, nothing like that. We just need to get a statement. Can we sit? They moved to a corner of the waiting room, away from the other people. Detective Ramirez pulled out a small notebook and pen. Take me through what happened, from the beginning. Luke recounted everything, leaving work, driving home, seeing the shape on the side of the road, finding the woman, calling 911. He tried to remember every detail, no matter how small. Did she say anything to you? Ramirez asked. Just a few words. She told me to run, said they would come back. She seemed scared. They? She specifically said they? Yeah. Or maybe she said he. I don't know, it was hard to hear. She was barely conscious. Ramirez made notes. Did you see any other vehicles? Anyone else on the road? No, it was dead empty. Just fog. And you didn't recognize her? Luke paused. There was something about that question, the way Ramirez asked it, that made him think the detective knew more than she was letting on. No, he said slowly. Should I? Ramirez studied him for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. Mr. Warren, the woman you found, did you notice anything distinctive about her? Jewelry, clothing, anything like that? Luke thought back. She had a watch. Expensive looking, but it was broken. And her clothes, what was left of them, looked like they cost more than I make in a month. Why? Who is she? Before Ramirez could answer, a commotion erupted from the emergency bay. Raised voices, someone shouting. Both Luke and the detective jumped to their feet. A man in an expensive suit was arguing with the ER staff, his voice echoing through the hallway. I demand to see her right now. Do you have any idea who I am? Who she is? Sir, you need to calm down, a nurse was saying. We can't let anyone back there right now. The hell you can't. I'm her emergency contact. Check your damn records. Detective Ramirez moved quickly toward the scene, Luke following behind her. As they got closer, Luke got a better look at the man. He was in his 40s, maybe early 50s, with silver hair slicked back and a face that was red with anger. His suit probably cost more than Luke's truck. Everything about him screamed money and power. What seems to be the problem? Ramirez asked, her voice calm but authoritative. The man spun toward her. The problem is that my associate is in there, possibly dying, and these people won't let me see her. And you are? Marcus Vance. I'm the CFO of Lennox Industries. The woman they brought in is Grace Lennox, our CEO. The name hit Luke like a physical blow. Grace Lennox. He stumbled back a step, his mind reeling. It couldn't be. It couldn't be her. Mr. Warren, you okay? Ramirez was looking at him with concern. Luke's mouth had gone dry. Grace Lennox, he repeated hoarsely. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure, Vance snapped. I've worked with her for 15 years. Now, are you going to let me see her or not? But Luke wasn't listening anymore. His mind had gone back 3 years to the worst time of his life. Maddie had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition. The surgery she needed cost more than he could ever hope to afford. He'd sold everything he could, taken out loans, started a GoFundMe, but it wasn't enough. They were weeks away from losing everything when an anonymous donor had paid the entire bill. The hospital had forwarded him a letter afterward. It was brief, typed on expensive letterhead from Lennox Industries. I believe every child deserves a chance at life. I hope this helps your family. Take care of that little girl. GL. He'd kept that letter. carried it in his wallet for 3 years like a talisman. Some nights when bills piled up and the world seemed impossibly hard, he'd take it out and read it, reminding himself that there were still good people in the world. And now that person, that stranger who'd saved his daughter's life, had been the broken, bloodied woman he'd found on the side of the road. "Oh my God," Luke breathed. Detective Ramirez touched his arm. "Mr. Warren? Do you know her?" "Not personally, but—" Luke's voice cracked. "She saved my daughter's life 3 years ago. She paid for Maddie's surgery when we had nothing left." The detective's eyes widened slightly. Behind her, Marcus Vance had stopped arguing with the nurses and was staring at Luke with an expression that was hard to read. "Grace did that?" Vance said quietly. His anger seemed to have evaporated, replaced by something that looked almost like surprise, or maybe guilt. Before anyone could say more, a doctor emerged from the emergency bay, a tall man with graying temples and exhausted eyes. "Family for Grace Lennox?" "That's me," Vance said immediately, pushing forward. "How is she?" The doctor glanced at Detective Ramirez, who nodded. "She's stable for now. Multiple contusions, a concussion, 3 cracked ribs, and significant lacerations. She's severely dehydrated and hypothermic. We're warming her up and getting fluids in her. She's lucky to be alive." "Can I see her?" "5 minutes. She needs rest." Vance moved to follow the doctor, but Ramirez stopped him. "Mr. Vance, I'll need to speak with you after. Don't go anywhere." Vance nodded curtly and disappeared through the double doors. Luke stood there, feeling lost and overwhelmed. The adrenaline had completely drained away now, leaving him feeling hollow and shaky. He should go home. Maddie was with her grandmother for the night, but he should get some sleep. There was nothing more he could do here, but he couldn't make his feet move. "Mr. Warren," Detective Ramirez said gently, "you should go home. Get some rest. I have your number if I need anything else." "Is she going to be okay?" Luke asked. "Really okay?" "The doctor said she's stable. That's a good sign." Luke nodded slowly. "Someone did this to her. Someone beat her and left her to die on that road." "We're going to find out who," Ramirez promised. "I give you my word." Luke wanted to believe her. He turned to leave, then stopped. "Detective, when she wakes up, will you tell her thank you for what she did for my family. Tell her Luke Warren says thank you." Ramirez's expression softened. "I will." Luke walked out into the cold night air, his mind spinning. He sat in his truck for a long moment before starting the engine. Grace Lennox's battered face burned into his memory. Whoever had done this to her, whoever had left her to die on that lonely road, Luke hoped they'd rot in hell. The next morning came too soon. Luke had barely slept, tossing and turning in his bed, replaying the events of the night over and over. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Grace Lennox lying on the side of the road, broken and bleeding. At 6:30 a.m., his phone rang. It was his mother-in-law, Carol, letting him know she was bringing Maddie home. "Everything okay?" Carol asked. "You sound tired." "Long night," Luke said, rubbing his face. "Work ran late." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. He didn't want to get into what had happened until he'd processed it himself. Maddie came through the door like a hurricane 20 minutes later, all energy and excitement despite the early hour. She was 8 years old with curly brown hair and her mother's green eyes that Luke sometimes couldn't look at without feeling a fresh wave of grief even 3 years after the accident. "Dad, Grandma made pancakes and we watched a movie and, Dad, are you listening?" Luke knelt down and pulled his daughter into a hug, holding her tight enough that she squirmed and laughed. "I'm listening, sweetheart. I'm listening." "You're squishing me." "Sorry." He let go, smiling at her. "I missed you." "I was only gone one night, Dad. You're being weird." If she only knew. He made her breakfast, eggs and toast, nothing fancy, and watched her eat while he nursed his third cup of coffee. His mind kept drifting back to the hospital, to Grace Lennox fighting for her life in a hospital bed. The woman who'd saved Maddie's life was now the one who needed saving. "Dad, you're staring again," Maddie said, waving her fork at him. "Sorry, kiddo, just thinking." "About what?" "Grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Maddie rolled her eyes in that way only an 8-year-old could. You always say that. After breakfast, Luke drove Maddie to school, then headed to Morrison's auto shop. It was going to be another long day, and he was already running on fumes. But bills didn't pay themselves. His boss, Jerry Morrison, a gruff man in his 60s with permanently grease-stained hands, looked up when Luke walked in. You look like hell, Warren. Feel like it too. Rough night. You get any sleep at all? Not really. Jerry studied him for a moment, then grunted. Well, we've got a full slate today. That Honda Accord needs new brakes, the Chevy pickup has transmission issues, and Mrs. Chen's minivan is making that noise again. The noise that you said was probably just, yeah, that noise. Turns out it's the CV joint. I already ordered the parts. Luke nodded and got to work, letting the familiar routine of wrenches and engine diagnostics distract him from the thoughts that kept circling in his head. But around 11 a.m., his phone buzzed with an unknown number. Luke wiped his hands on his coveralls and answered. Is this Luke Warren? A woman's voice asked. Speaking. This is Detective Ramirez. We spoke last night at the hospital. I was hoping you could come down to the station and answer a few more questions. Luke's stomach dropped. Am I in trouble? No, nothing like that. We just need to go over your statement again. There are some details we'd like to clarify. Okay, when? Would this afternoon work? Say 2 o'clock? Luke glanced at Jerry, who was watching him with raised eyebrows. Yeah, I can do that. Great. Millbrook Police Department, ask for me at the front desk. She hung up before he could ask any more questions. Everything okay? Jerry asked. Luke hesitated, then told him everything. About finding Grace Lennox, about what she'd done for Maddie, about the police wanting to talk to him again. Jerry listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each word. Holy hell, Luke, he said when Luke finished. Grace Lennox. That's big news. I'm surprised it's not all over the internet already. You think it will be? Woman like that goes missing? Beaten half to death? Yeah, it's going to be news, probably national news. Jerry paused. You did a good thing, finding her, saving her life. I just did what anyone would do. No, Jerry said firmly. Most people would have driven right past, especially on a night like that. You stopped. That matters. Luke nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The weight of everything was starting to settle on his shoulders. The magnitude of what had happened. What could have happened if he'd been 5 minutes later, if he'd been looking at his phone instead of the road. Go, Jerry said. Talk to the cops. Take the rest of the day if you need it. We'll manage here. You sure? Yeah. Go. Out. The Millbrook Police Department was a converted old building that had once been a post office, with high ceilings and narrow windows that didn't let in much light. Luke arrived at 1:55 p.m., his palms sweating despite the cold. Detective Ramirez met him in the lobby and led him to a small interview room with gray walls, a metal table, and uncomfortable plastic chairs. There was a mirror on one wall that Luke was pretty sure was two-way glass, though he'd only ever seen those in movies. Thanks for coming in, Mr. Warren, Ramirez said, setting down a folder and a cup of coffee. Coffee? I'm good, thanks. She sat across from him, opening the folder. Inside were photos, crime scene photos, Luke realized with a jolt. Pictures of the stretch of highway where he'd found Grace, the guardrail, the ground, everything documented in harsh camera flash. I want to walk through your statement again, Ramirez said. Sometimes people remember details later that they didn't think were important at the time. Okay. They went through everything again, what time he'd left work, what he'd seen, what Grace had said. Ramirez asked questions Luke didn't know how to answer. Had there been tire marks on the road? Had he smelled anything unusual? Had Grace's injuries looked fresh or older? I don't know, Luke said, frustrated. I'm a mechanic, not a doctor. I just knew she was hurt bad and needed help. And you're sure you didn't see any other vehicles? No headlights in the distance? No cars passing by? No, the road was empty. Ramirez made notes. Mr. Warren, what can you tell me about Marcus Vance? The change in topic threw Luke off. The guy from last night? Nothing. I'd never seen him before. He's the CFO of Lennox Industries, Grace Lennox's second in command. He showed up at the hospital very quickly after she was brought in. We're trying to figure out how he knew she was there. Luke frowned. Maybe someone from the hospital called him? If he's her emergency contact, the hospital didn't have time to call anyone before he showed up, which means he either got very lucky or he knew something was wrong before we did. The implications of that hung in the air between them. You think he had something to do with what happened to her? Luke asked slowly. I'm not ruling anything out. But I need you to understand something, Mr. Warren. Grace Lennox is a very powerful woman. She's worth billions. She has enemies, business rivals, people who want to see her fail. What happened to her last night might not be random. Luke's mouth went dry. You think someone tried to kill her? I think someone beat her severely and left her in a location where she would have died if you hadn't found her. Whether that was the intent or just collateral damage, I don't know yet. Luke sat back, trying to process that. Someone had tried to murder Grace Lennox. The woman who'd saved his daughter's life had been left to die, and if Luke had been 5 minutes later, if he'd taken a different route home. I need to know if anyone's contacted you since last night, Ramirez continued. Phone calls, emails, messages from people you don't know, anything unusual. No, nothing. Why would they? Because you're a witness. You found her. You might have seen something without realizing it. Ramirez leaned forward. I need you to be careful, Mr. Warren. Watch your back. If someone asks you questions about that night, you call me immediately. Got it? Luke's heart was hammering now. You think I'm in danger? I think you should be cautious, that's all. She slid a business card across the table with her direct number on it. Luke took it with shaking hands. Can I see her? The question was out before Luke could stop himself. Grace, can I see her? Ramirez hesitated. She's still in the ICU. Only immediate family. Please, I need to know she's okay. She saved my daughter's life, and I never got to thank her properly. Please. The detective studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Let me make a call. What? An hour later, Luke stood outside the ICU at Millbrook Regional, his heart in his throat. Detective Ramirez had pulled strings, or maybe just called in favors, to get him in for 5 minutes. A uniformed officer stood guard outside Grace's room, which told Luke everything he needed to know about how seriously the police were taking this. A nurse led him to the door. 5 minutes, she said firmly. She needs rest. Luke nodded and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, machines beeping softly in the background. Grace Lennox lay in the hospital bed, small and fragile-looking under white sheets. Her face was still swollen and bruised, but someone had cleaned the blood away and bandaged the worst of her wounds. An IV ran into her arm, and monitors tracked her heartbeat and oxygen levels. She was awake, but barely. Her gray eyes were half open, staring at nothing. Ms. Lennox? Luke said quietly, stepping closer. I don't know if you remember me. I'm Luke Warren. I'm the one who found you last night. Her eyes shifted toward him slowly, like it took effort. For a long moment, she just stared at him, and Luke wondered if she was too out of it to understand. Then her cracked lips moved. You stayed. Luke's throat tightened. Yeah, I stayed. I couldn't just leave you there. A single tear rolled down her bruised cheek. Thank you. No, Luke said, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you. 3 years ago, you saved my daughter's life. You paid for her surgery when we had nothing left. I never got to thank you for that. So thank you. Thank you for giving me my daughter back. Grace's eyes widened slightly, recognition flickering in them. Your daughter? Maddie? Luke was shocked she remembered. Yes, Maddie. She's 8 now. She's healthy and happy and alive because of you. More tears now, silent and steady. I'm glad, Grace whispered. So glad. Who did this to you? Luke asked gently. The police are looking, but can't... She closed her eyes, exhausted. Can't talk about it. Not safe. You're safe now. There's a cop outside your door. Nobody's getting in here. But Grace was shaking her head weakly. You don't understand. They're powerful. They'll try again. Then let me help. Let me do for you what you did for me. Her eyes opened again, searching his face. Why? Because somebody has to. Because it's the right thing to do. Because you matter. Luke pulled up a chair and sat down beside her bed. "You're not alone in this. I promise." Grace looked at him for a long time, and Luke saw something shift in her expression, a wall coming down, hope flickering in where there had been only fear. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay." The nurse knocked on the door. "Time's up, Mr. Warren." Luke stood reluctantly. "I'll come back if you want me to." "Please," Grace said. Her hand moved slightly on the blanket, reaching out. Luke took it carefully, mindful of her injuries, and squeezed gently. "I'll be back tomorrow," he promised. As he left the room, passing the guard and the nurse's station, Luke felt something settle in his chest, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Grace Lennox had saved his family once. Now it was his turn to save her, whatever that took. Behind him, in that hospital room, Grace Lennox closed her eyes and, for the first time since her nightmare had begun, allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was going to survive this after all. The promise Luke made to Grace Lennox wasn't one he took lightly. That night, after picking up Maddie from her after-school program, he found himself distracted during dinner, pushing spaghetti around his plate while his daughter chattered about her day. She'd gotten an A on her spelling test. Her friend Emma had brought cupcakes for her birthday. Normal, beautiful, mundane things that suddenly felt precious and fragile. "Dad, you're doing it again," Maddie said, her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "The staring thing." Luke blinked and focused on her. "Sorry, sweetheart. I've just got a lot on my mind." "Is it work stuff?" "Sort of." Luke set down his fork, debating how much to tell her. Maddie was smart. Too smart sometimes, and she could always tell when he was holding something back. "Actually, something happened last night that I need to talk to you about." Maddie's eyes widened. "Are we in trouble?" No, nothing like that." Luke took a breath. "Remember a few years ago when you were sick? When you had to have the surgery?" Maddie's hand went unconsciously to her chest, where a small scar hid beneath her shirt. She didn't like talking about that time, and Luke couldn't blame her. She'd been so small, so scared, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred while Luke held her hand and tried not to let her see him cry. "I remember," she said quietly. "And remember how someone donated the money to pay for everything? An anonymous person who we never got to meet?" "The Angel Lady," Maddie said. That's what she'd called her back then. The Angel Lady who'd saved her life. "What about her?" Luke's throat tightened. "I found out who she is. Her name is Grace Lennox, and last night I found her hurt on the side of the road. She's in the hospital now." Maddie's fork clattered against her plate. "The Angel Lady is hurt?" "She's going to be okay," Luke said quickly, reaching across to take his daughter's hand. "The doctors are taking good care of her, but she's alone, Maddie. She doesn't have family here, and the person who hurt her might try again. So I was thinking, maybe we could help her, the way she helped us." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I promised her I'd come back tomorrow, and I wanted you to know why this is important to me, why she's important." Maddie was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, "Can I come with you to the hospital? I want to meet her. I want to say thank you." Luke hadn't expected that, but looking at his daughter's earnest face, he realized it made perfect sense. "Let me ask the hospital first, okay? She's pretty hurt, and they might not allow visitors your age. But if they say yes, then absolutely." "Okay." Maddie squeezed his hand. "Dad? I'm glad you found her. I'm glad you helped her." "Me too, kiddo. Me too." That night, after Maddie was asleep, Luke sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open, searching for information about Grace Lennox. What he found made his head spin. She wasn't just wealthy, she was one of the most successful businesswomen in the country. Lennox Industries was a tech giant, worth billions, with headquarters in Seattle and offices in 12 countries. Grace had founded the company at 26 with a single patent and had built it into an empire over the course of 15 years. But it wasn't just her business success that caught Luke's attention. It was the philanthropy. Grace had quietly donated hundreds of millions to causes ranging from children's hospitals to clean water initiatives to education programs in developing countries. She did interviews rarely, kept her private life intensely private, and by all accounts was brilliant, driven, and utterly dedicated to her work. Luke clicked on an image, a professional headshot from some business magazine. Grace wore a gray suit, her dark hair pulled back, those steel gray eyes looking directly at the camera, with an intensity that made Luke understand why people called her formidable. This was the CEO, the billionaire, the untouchable figure who sat in boardrooms and made decisions that affected thousands of lives. And 2 nights ago, she'd been broken and bleeding on the side of a highway, begging him to run. Luke closed the laptop, his mind churning. Who would want to hurt someone like Grace Lennox? Business rivals? Someone from her company? The way Detective Ramirez had talked about Marcus Vance made Luke wonder if the threat came from inside Lennox Industries itself. His phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Stop asking questions. Stop visiting her. Walk away while you still can. Luke's blood ran cold. He stared at the message, his heart hammering. Then he screenshot it and immediately called Detective Ramirez. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding alert despite the late hour. Warren? What's wrong? I just got a threat, a text message telling me to stay away from Grace Lennox. I'm sending an officer to your house. Don't leave. Don't answer the door for anyone except police. I'm on my way. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Luke's life. He checked on Maddie twice, finding her safe and asleep in her bed, oblivious to the danger that had just crashed into their lives. He kept the lights off, peering through the curtains at the quiet street outside, half expecting to see someone watching the house. When the police cruiser pulled up, Luke nearly collapsed with relief. 2 officers checked the perimeter while Detective Ramirez sat with him at the kitchen table, examining his phone. We'll trace this number, but I'm guessing it's a burner, she said. They're getting nervous. That's good. Good? Luke stared at her. Someone just threatened me. I have a daughter sleeping upstairs. How is any of this good? Ramirez met his eyes. Because scared people make mistakes, and we're going to catch them. She set down his phone. But I need you to understand something. This is serious now. You're not just a witness anymore. You're a target. I can assign protection, but my resources are limited. The safest thing would be for you to stay away from Grace Lennox, at least until we have someone in custody. Luke thought about Grace's face in that hospital bed, the tears streaming down her bruised cheeks, the way she'd whispered, please, when she thought she was alone and dying. He thought about Maddie's surgery, the letter he still carried in his wallet, the second chance his daughter had gotten because a stranger decided to care. No, he said, I'm not walking away. Mr. Warren, she saved my daughter's life. I'm not abandoning her when she needs help, but I need to know my daughter is safe. Can you guarantee that? Ramirez was quiet for a moment. I can put an officer on your house for the next few days. After that, we'll reassess. But Luke, and I'm calling you Luke now because I need you to hear me, if this escalates, if we determine the threat level is too high, you need to listen to me. Your daughter comes first. Always, Luke said. But right now, helping Grace is the best way to keep Maddie safe, because whoever did this needs to be caught before they hurt anyone else. Ramirez studied him, then nodded slowly. Okay, but you follow my rules. You don't go anywhere without telling me. You notice anything suspicious, you call immediately, and you do not try to investigate this yourself. Are we clear? Crystal. After the police left, with an officer stationed in a cruiser outside, Luke finally allowed himself to breathe. He checked on Maddie one more time, kissed her forehead, and whispered a prayer he hadn't said since his wife died. Keep her safe. Please, God, keep her safe. The next morning dawned gray and cold, with the kind of drizzle that made everything look washed out and miserable. Luke called Jerry and explained the situation, or at least the parts he could share, and his boss immediately gave him the day off. You do what you need to do, Jerry said. Family comes first, and yeah, I know she's not technically family, but from what you've told me, she might as well be. We'll manage here. Luke dropped Maddie at school with strict instructions to stay with her teacher, not to leave with anyone except him or her grandmother, and to call him immediately if anything felt wrong. Maddie, bless her, took it all seriously, nodding solemnly and hugging him extra tight before running to join her friends. The officer who'd been on watch outside Luke's house, a young guy named Patterson, followed him to the hospital in the cruiser. It felt surreal, having a police escort for a visit to see someone in the ICU, but Luke was grateful for it after the threat last night. At the hospital, Luke signed in at the front desk and made his way up to the ICU. The guard outside Grace's room recognized him and waved him through after checking with the nurse. Grace was awake, sitting slightly upright in bed. She looked marginally better than yesterday. Some of the swelling had gone down, and there was color in her cheeks that hadn't been there before. But her eyes still held that haunted look, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Luke," she said when he entered, her voice stronger than he expected. "You came back. I told you I would." Luke pulled up the same chair he'd sat in yesterday. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was hit by a truck." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "But alive, thanks to you. The doctor said you're going to make a full recovery." "That's good news." Grace's smile faded. "Did they tell you how long I have to stay here?" "At least a week. Maybe more. You had a concussion, cracked ribs, and they want to monitor you for complications." "A week." Grace closed her eyes. "A week is too long. They'll find a way to get to me." "Who?" Luke leaned forward. "Grace, who did this to you? The police need to know." For a long moment, Grace said nothing. Luke could see the internal struggle playing out on her face, the fear warring with the need to trust someone, anyone. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "His name is Marcus Vance." Luke's breath caught. The CFO. The man who'd shown up at the hospital demanding to see her. "He's been with your company for 15 years, Luke said slowly. "Why would he want to hurt you?" "Because I found out what he's been doing." Grace's hands clenched on the blanket. "For the past 2 years, Marcus has been embezzling money from the company. Millions of dollars funneled through fake contracts and offshore accounts. I discovered it 3 days ago while reviewing quarterly reports. I confronted him in my office, told him I was going to the board and the authorities. And he attacked you. Not right away. He acted shocked, apologetic, said it was a misunderstanding, and he could explain everything. He asked me to meet him that night to go over the documents, somewhere private where we wouldn't be interrupted. I should have known better. I should have seen it coming." Grace's voice broke. "But I trusted him. After 15 years, I trusted him." Luke's jaw tightened. "What happened at the meeting?" "It wasn't just Marcus. There were 2 other men I'd never seen before. They grabbed me the moment I walked into the warehouse he'd chosen. Marcus stood there and watched while they—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "They beat me. They took my phone, my wallet, everything. Marcus said I was going to disappear, that they'd make it look like I'd run away or had an accident. He said no one would question it because I was known for being private, for keeping to myself." "But you got away," Luke said. "One of them got careless, left a door unlocked when they thought I was unconscious. I ran. I don't even know how far or for how long. Everything after that is a blur until I woke up and saw you kneeling beside me." Luke sat back, processing this. "Grace, you need to tell Detective Ramirez all of this, right now. Marcus Vance showed up here the night you were brought in. He's been playing the concerned colleague, and if he's the one behind this, he'll know I told you," Grace said, fear flashing in her eyes. "Luke, you don't understand. Marcus is smart. He's connected. He's been planning this for years. If he knows I'm talking, he'll what? Come after me? He already has." Luke pulled out his phone and showed her the threatening text message. "I got this last night. Someone wants me to stop visiting you, to stop asking questions. That someone is probably Marcus, which means he's scared. And scared people make mistakes." Grace stared at the message, her face going pale. "Oh God, Luke, I'm so sorry. I never meant to drag you into this. You have a daughter, a life, and you saved that daughter's life," Luke interrupted firmly. "I'm not walking away, Grace, but we need to do this smart. Let me call Detective Ramirez. Let's get Marcus arrested before he can hurt anyone else." Grace was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, call her." Detective Ramirez arrived 30 minutes later, and Grace told her everything. Ramirez recorded the conversation, asked pointed questions, and by the end, her expression was grim. "This gives us enough to bring Marcus in for questioning," she said. "But we need proof of the embezzlement. Grace, do you have copies of the documents you found?" They're on my laptop, in my office at Lennox Industries headquarters. We'll get a warrant. In the meantime, I'm doubling the guard on your room. No one gets in without my explicit approval. Ramirez looked at Luke. And you need to be careful. If Marcus knows you're helping Grace, he might see you as a threat. He already does, Luke said, gesturing to his phone. But I'm not backing down. After Ramirez left to start the process of getting warrants and bringing Marcus in, Luke stayed with Grace. They talked, really talked, for the first time. Grace asked about Maddie, and Luke found himself telling stories about his daughter that he rarely shared with anyone. How she'd been so brave during her surgery, telling the nurses not to worry because her dad said everything would be okay. How she'd learned to ride a bike last summer and had fallen so many times but refused to give up. How she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up because she loved animals more than anything. She sounds wonderful, Grace said softly. You're a good father, Luke. I try. It's not always easy doing it alone. Your wife, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry, but the hospital records mentioned car accident 3 years ago. Luke's voice was steady, but the pain was still there, just beneath the surface. Drunk driver ran a red light. She died instantly. Maddie was with my mother-in-law that night, thank God. I'm so sorry. Me too. Luke cleared his throat. But we got through it. We had help from people like you. That donation you made, Grace, it wasn't just about the money. It was hope. It was proof that there was still good in the world when everything felt dark and impossible. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I wish I could have done more. For you, for Maddie, for all the families that need help. You've done more than most people ever will. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the beeping of monitors and the distant hum of the hospital. Then Grace said, Luke, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you really doing this? Helping me, I mean. It's not just about the donation, is it? Luke thought about that. No, he admitted. It's more than that. When I found you on that road, you reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that we're all connected, that what we do for each other matters. You helped my family when we were at our lowest. Now you're at yours. How could I walk away from that? Grace reached out and took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong despite her injuries. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for not leaving me there. Always, Luke said. The moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. A nurse poked her head in. Mr. Warren, there's a young lady here who's very insistent about seeing you. Says her name is Maddie? Luke's heart jumped. He looked at his watch. School wasn't out for another 2 hours. Maddie? Is she okay? She's fine. She's with an older woman, says she's her grandmother. Carol. Luke stood quickly. I'll be right there. He found Maddie and Carol in the waiting room, and his daughter ran to him the moment she spotted him. Dad! Grandma said we could come if I finished my math test early. Did we mess up? Are you mad? Luke knelt down and hugged her. No, sweetheart, I'm not mad. But what are you doing here? Maddie pulled back and looked at him with those serious green eyes. I wanted to meet the angel lady. I wanted to say thank you. You said maybe I could, so I asked Grandma if we could come, and she called the school and everything. Please don't be mad at her. Luke looked up at Carol, who shrugged apologetically. She was very persuasive, and I thought maybe Grace Lennox might like to meet the girl whose life she saved. Luke's throat tightened. He looked down at Maddie. Okay, but you have to be gentle, okay? She's hurt pretty bad and she needs to rest. And if the nurses say you can't go in, you don't argue. I promise. The nurses, bless them, took one look at Maddie's hopeful face and made an exception to their no children in the ICU policy. Luke led his daughter into Grace's room, Carol waiting outside. Grace's face when she saw Maddie was something Luke would remember for the rest of his life. Surprise, joy, and something that looked almost like wonder, all mixed together. Hi, Maddie said shyly, hanging back near the door. I'm Maddie. You saved my life. Oh, Grace breathed. Oh, Maddie. Come here, sweetheart. Please. Maddie looked at Luke for permission, and he nodded. She walked over to the bed carefully, like she was afraid of breaking something. I wanted to say thank you, Maddie continued, for what you did, for helping me and my dad. We didn't have anyone else. and you helped us even though you didn't know us. That was really nice. Grace was crying now, tears streaming down her face. You're very welcome, Maddie. Can I tell you a secret? Maddie nodded. When I heard about a little girl who needed help, I thought about what I would want someone to do if she were my daughter, and I knew I had to help. Seeing you now, healthy and happy, that's the best thank you I could ever get. Maddie smiled. My dad says you don't have any family here, that you're alone. Is that true? Yes, it's just me. Then you can share ours, Maddie announced with the simple certainty of childhood. Dad always says family isn't just blood, it's the people who care about you. So you can be part of our family now if you want. Luke's vision blurred. He hadn't coached her to say any of this. It was pure Maddie, generous and loving and seeing the world in exactly the way it should be seen. Grace covered her mouth with her hand, completely overwhelmed. When she could speak, she said, I would like that very much. Thank you, Maddie. Maddie beamed and carefully, gently, hugged Grace around the shoulders. Grace closed her eyes and held her, and Luke turned away to wipe his own eyes before his daughter could see. The visit was short. The nurses only allowed 10 minutes, but it transformed something in Grace. When Maddie and Carol left, Grace looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She's incredible, Grace said. Luke, you've raised an amazing human being. She gets that from her mother, Luke said, but thank you. And the offer she made about being part of your family, did she mean that? Maddie doesn't say things she doesn't mean. So yeah, if you want to be part of our weird little family, the position is yours. Grace laughed, actually laughed, for the first time since Luke had met her. I want that, very much. The moment of lightness was shattered when Detective Ramirez burst through the door, her face urgent. We have a problem. Marcus Vance is gone. He cleaned out his office, his apartment, everything. He's in the wind. Luke's blood ran cold. What about the warrant? We got it, but by the time we arrived at Lennox Industries, he was already gone. Must have had someone tip him off. Ramirez looked at Grace. We're going to find him, but until we do, you're not safe. Not here, not anywhere public. What are you suggesting? Grace asked. Witness protection. We move you to a safe house, keep you under guard until we can locate Marcus and bring him in. Grace shook her head. No. If I disappear, if I hide, Marcus wins. He gets to spin whatever story he wants, and I lose everything I've built. My company, my reputation, everything. You could lose your life, Ramirez said bluntly. Is your company worth dying for? It's not just about the company. It's about proving that people like Marcus don't get to win just because they're willing to hurt others. I won't run. Luke saw the determination in Grace's eyes and recognized it. It was the same look Maddie had gotten when she'd insisted on learning to ride that bike, falling over and over but refusing to quit. Grace Lennox hadn't built a billion-dollar company by backing down when things got hard. Then we need another plan, Luke heard himself saying. Both women turned to look at him. Grace can't stay here. The hospital's too public, too many access points. And witness protection means giving up everything. But what if there was a third option? I'm listening, Ramirez said. Luke took a breath, knowing this was probably the craziest thing he'd ever suggested. She comes home with me, to my house. It's small, it's off the radar, and Marcus wouldn't think to look there. We keep a guard posted, and Grace stays out of sight until you find Marcus. Absolutely not, Grace said immediately. Luke, I can't put you and Maddie in danger like that. We're already in danger. That text message proved it. At least this way, we're all in the same place where we can watch out for each other. It's not a terrible idea, Ramirez said slowly. Marcus is looking for Grace in obvious places. Hospitals, hotels, safe houses. A mechanic's house in a quiet neighborhood? That's the last place he'd look. No, Grace insisted. I won't risk Maddie. I won't. Luke moved closer to her bed. Grace, listen to me. Maddie already sees you as family. If something happened to you because we didn't do everything we could to keep you safe, she'd never forgive herself. Neither would I. Let us help you, please. Grace looked between Luke and Detective Ramirez, clearly torn. Finally, she closed her eyes and nodded. Okay, but the moment it becomes too dangerous, I'm gone. I won't let anything happen to Maddie. Promise me. I promise, Luke said. Ramirez made some calls, and within the hour, they had a plan. Grace would be discharged into Luke's custody, officially as a patient requiring home care, and transported to his house in an unmarked car. An officer would be stationed outside around the clock, and Ramirez would personally check in twice daily. Grace would stay out of sight, recover, and work with the police to build a case against Marcus from the safety of Luke's home. It sounded simple on paper. Luke had a feeling the reality would be anything but. That evening, as the sun set over Millbrook, Grace Lennox was wheeled out of the hospital in a wheelchair, her face hidden under a baseball cap and sunglasses. Luke walked beside her, carrying a small bag of her belongings that the police had recovered from her abandoned car. Detective Ramirez and Officer Patterson flanked them, eyes scanning for any threat. They made it to Luke's truck without incident. He helped Grace into the passenger seat, her movements slow and painful despite the medication. She didn't complain, just gritted her teeth and buckled herself in. The drive to Luke's house felt longer than usual. Every car that passed seemed suspicious. Every person on the sidewalk could be a threat. But they arrived safely, pulling into the driveway of Luke's modest two-bedroom house with its peeling paint and overgrown lawn. "Home sweet home," Luke said, trying for lightness. "It's not much, but it's perfect," Grace said quietly. "Thank you, Luke." Getting Grace inside and settled was an operation. She was more mobile than she'd been in the hospital, but the cracked ribs and lingering effects of the concussion made everything difficult. Luke set her up in his bedroom, the only bedroom on the ground floor, ignoring her protests. "Maddie and I will be fine upstairs," he said firmly. "You need to be able to rest without climbing stairs." Carol had picked up Maddie from school and brought her home, and Luke's daughter burst through the door with enough energy for 3 kids. She stopped short when she saw Grace sitting carefully on the edge of Luke's bed. "You're staying with us?" Maddie asked, eyes wide. "For a little while," Grace said, "if that's okay with you." "It's super okay. This is going to be so fun. I can show you my room and my stuffed animals, and we can watch movies and... Dad, can we make Grace dinner? Something really good?" Luke laughed despite everything. "Yeah, kiddo, we can make dinner." That night, the 3 of them sat around Luke's small kitchen table, Grace moving gingerly, Maddie chattering nonstop, Luke feeling like his world had tilted on its axis and might never quite right itself again. They ate spaghetti and garlic bread, nothing fancy, but Grace ate like it was the best meal she'd ever had. "This is wonderful," she said. "I can't remember the last time I had a home-cooked meal." "Really?" Maddie looked shocked. "But you're super rich. Don't you have people who cook for you?" "Maddie," Luke said warningly, but Grace just smiled. "I do have people who could cook for me, but I usually just eat at the office, or don't eat at all when I'm busy. This, sitting around a table with people I care about, this is special." After dinner, Maddie insisted on showing Grace her room, and the 2 of them disappeared upstairs while Luke cleaned the kitchen. Through the ceiling, he could hear Maddie's voice explaining her various stuffed animals and their elaborate backstories. Grace's quieter responses. Laughter. It felt right having Grace here. Dangerous, complicated, probably insane, but right. Detective Ramirez stopped by at 9 o'clock for her evening check-in. "Everything quiet?" she asked Luke on the front porch. "So far." "How's the search for Marcus going?" "We've got alerts out on his credit cards, his phone, his car, but he's smart. He probably ditched all of that and is using cash and burner phones. We'll find him, but it might take time." Grace doesn't have time. She's healing, but she's still hurt. And the longer Marcus is out there... "I know," Ramirez sighed. "We're doing everything we can. In the meantime, you keep her safe, and you call me if anything feels off. Anything at all." After Ramirez left, Luke checked on Grace. She was still in Maddie's room, but his daughter had fallen asleep against her shoulder, worn out from the excitement of the day. Grace's eyes met Luke's across the room, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that went beyond words. Carefully, Luke lifted Maddie and carried her to her bed. Grace stood slowly, wincing. "Let me help you downstairs," Luke said softly. "I can manage." "Grace." She relented, letting him support her weight as they navigated the stairs. In his bedroom, Luke had set out fresh towels and one of his old t-shirts for her to sleep in. "If you need anything during the night, I'm just upstairs," he said. "And Officer Patterson is right outside." "Luke, Grace paused, then continued. "I haven't felt safe in days. since before Marcus attacked me. But here, in your home, with you and Maddie, I feel safe. Thank you for that." "Always," Luke said, and meant it. He left her to rest and climbed the stairs to Maddie's room, where he'd be sleeping on an air mattress on the floor. It wasn't comfortable, but comfort wasn't the point. The point was keeping his daughter safe, keeping Grace safe, and hoping that Detective Ramirez could find Marcus before everything fell apart. Luke lay in the dark, listening to Maddie's soft breathing and the house settling around them. Outside, Officer Patterson's cruiser sat silent watch, and downstairs, Grace Lennox, billionaire CEO, philanthropist, and now part of their strange little family, was sleeping under his roof. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow, they'd figure out the next steps. But tonight, they were all safe. Tonight, that was enough. Morning came too early, sunlight streaming through Maddie's bedroom window and hitting Luke square in the face. He groaned, his back protesting every movement as he rolled off the air mattress. Sleeping on the floor at 34 was a lot different than it had been at 24, and his body was making sure he knew it. Maddie was already awake, sitting up in bed and looking down at him with an amused expression. "You snore, Dad." "I do not." "You totally do. It sounds like a bear." Luke stood, stretching until something in his spine popped. "Come on, bear sounds. Let's get you ready for school." "Can I say good morning to Grace first?" "Let her sleep, kiddo. She needs rest." But when they crept downstairs 20 minutes later, Grace was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. She was wearing Luke's old t-shirt and a pair of his sweatpants that she'd had to roll up several times, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The bruises on her face had deepened overnight, turning spectacular shades of purple and yellow, and she moved carefully, like every breath hurt. "Good morning," she said, managing a smile when she saw them. "I hope I didn't overstep. I found the coffee." No, that's fine. You didn't have to get up so early." "Couldn't sleep anyway. Too much going on in here." Grace tapped her temple. "Plus, I wanted to see Maddie before she left for school." Maddie beamed and went straight to Grace, giving her a gentle hug. "Good morning. Do your ribs still hurt?" "A little, but I'm tougher than I look." "You look pretty tough to me. Those bruises are kind of cool. Not cool that you got hurt, but cool like a warrior or something." Grace laughed, then winced and pressed a hand to her side. "A warrior. I like that." Luke made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy, and the three of them ate together. It was domestic and strange and perfect all at once. Grace asked Maddie about school, and his daughter launched into a detailed explanation of a project they were doing on the solar system. "I'm doing Jupiter because it's the biggest, and it has that cool red spot that's actually a giant storm," Maddie said around a mouthful of eggs. "Emma wanted to do Jupiter too, but Mrs. Patterson said we couldn't both do it, so Emma picked Saturn instead because of the rings." "Jupiter's an excellent choice," Grace said seriously. "Did you know that Jupiter's great red spot is so big that 3 Earths could fit inside it?" Maddie's eyes went wide. "Really? 3 whole Earths?" "Really. And the storm has been raging for at least 350 years, probably longer." "That's so cool. Can you help me with my project, please?" Grace glanced at Luke, who nodded. "I'd love to help. We can work on it after school if you want." The morning routine continued. Maddie brushing her teeth, grabbing her backpack, Luke double-checking that she had her lunch and homework. At the door, Maddie hugged Grace goodbye like she'd been doing it her whole life. "See you later. We're going to make the best Jupiter project ever." After Maddie left with Carol, who was driving her to school, the house fell quiet. Luke cleaned up the breakfast dishes while Grace sat at the table, staring into her coffee cup. "You okay?" Luke asked. "I was just thinking how different this is from my normal life. 2 days ago, I was running a billion-dollar company, making decisions that affected thousands of people. Now I'm sitting in a stranger's kitchen wearing borrowed clothes and feeling grateful for scrambled eggs. Is that a bad thing? No?" Grace looked up at him, and her expression was unguarded in a way Luke hadn't seen before. "It's actually kind of wonderful. I'd forgotten what it feels like to just be. To sit and talk about Jupiter and not worry about stock prices or board meetings. I'd forgotten what a real family looks like." Luke dried his hands and sat down across from her. "You never had that? Growing up?" Grace's smile turned sad. My parents were academics, brilliant, driven, completely absorbed in their work. I was more of an inconvenience than a daughter. They sent me to boarding schools, summer camps, anywhere that would take me so they could focus on their research. When I started my company, they called it frivolous, said I was wasting my potential on commerce instead of pursuing real intellectual achievement. That's terrible. I'm sorry. Don't be. It made me who I am. Independent, driven, determined to prove I didn't need anyone. Grace paused. But sitting here with you and Maddie, I'm realizing that maybe I was wrong. Maybe needing people isn't weakness. Maybe it's what makes us human. Before Luke could respond, his phone rang. Detective Ramirez. We've got a lead on Marcus, she said without preamble. One of his credit cards was used at a gas station near the Canadian border. We're coordinating with Border Patrol, but he might try to cross into Canada. How's Grace doing? She's okay. Healing. Safe. Good. Keep it that way. I'll update you when we know more. Luke relayed the information to Grace, who received it with a mixture of hope and anxiety. If he makes it to Canada, can they still catch him? I don't know, but Ramirez seems confident. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Grace was supposed to be resting, but she kept getting up, restless and uncomfortable with inactivity. Luke finally set her up on the couch with his laptop so she could at least check emails, though Ramirez had warned against doing anything that might tip off Marcus about her location. I have to stay dark on social media, can't access company systems, can't make calls to anyone at Lennox Industries, Grace said, frustrated. It's like I've disappeared off the face of the earth. Meanwhile, Marcus is probably spinning stories about where I've gone, positioning himself to take over. Would the board let that happen? They might not have a choice if they think I've abandoned the company. Marcus is charismatic, persuasive. He's been cultivating relationships with board members for years. If he tells them I've had a breakdown or that I've run away, they might believe him. Luke thought about that. What if you sent them a message? Not publicly, but directly to people you trust. Let them know you're alive and coming back. Ramirez said, I know what Ramirez said, but you built that company. You shouldn't have to lose it because some criminal tried to kill you. Grace considered this, then nodded slowly. You're right, I need to fight back. But carefully. She spent the next hour composing encrypted emails to 3 board members she absolutely trusted, explaining what had happened and that she was safe but in hiding. She kept the messages vague about her location but made it clear that Marcus was dangerous and not to be trusted with company leadership. There, she said, hitting send on the last one. Now we wait and see if Marcus has already poisoned them against me. Around noon, Luke's phone rang again. This time it was Jerry. Hey boss, Luke said. Everything okay at the shop? Shop's fine. Question is, are you okay? Word's getting around town about what happened. Someone saw you at the hospital with that Lennox woman, and now there are rumors flying. Luke's stomach sank. What kind of rumors? That you're somehow involved with her disappearance, that you know where she is. Luke, you've got reporters calling the shop asking about you. I've been telling them to pound sand, but this is getting messy. I can't talk about it, Jerry. I'm sorry. It's complicated. I figured as much. Just watch yourself, okay? And if you need anything at all, you call me. After hanging up, Luke found Grace had overheard the entire conversation. Her face was pale. Reporters are looking for you because of me, she said. Luke, this is exactly what I was afraid of. Your life is being turned upside down. My life was already upside down the minute I found you on that road. This is just part of the process. Luke tried to sound more confident than he felt. We'll get through it. But the phone calls kept coming, friends asking if he was okay, Carol wanting to know what was going on. Even Maddie's school called to confirm that Carol was authorized to pick her up, given the unusual circumstances. By mid-afternoon, Officer Patterson knocked on the door with concerning news. There's a news van parked down the street. They haven't approached the house yet, but they're watching. Grace stood up from the couch, her face set with determination despite the pain it obviously caused her. I need to leave. This was a mistake. I'm putting you all in danger, drawing attention. Sit down, Luke said firmly. You're not going anywhere. Luke, no, listen to me. Yes, this is complicated. Yes, there are reporters and rumors and all kinds of chaos. But that's not your fault. That's Marcus's fault.
He's the one who did this, who attacked you, who's trying to ruin your life. We are not letting him win by running scared." Grace sank back onto the couch, tears forming in her eyes. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person who needs help instead of the person giving it." Luke sat down beside her. "You learn, one day at a time, and you trust the people around you to have your back the same way you've had theirs. Is that what you did after your wife died?" The question caught Luke off guard. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I didn't want to at first. I wanted to handle everything myself, prove I could be strong for Maddie. But my friends, my family, they didn't let me. They showed up with casseroles and offers to babysit and shoulders to cry on. I learned that accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom." Grace reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you for everything." The moment was interrupted by the sound of a car door slamming outside. Luke moved to the window and saw Detective Ramirez getting out of her unmarked car, her expression grim. He opened the door before she could knock. "What's wrong?" "Marcus gave us the slip at the border. He ditched his car and disappeared. We're searching the area, but—" Ramirez shook her head. "He could be anywhere by now." Grace had come up behind Luke, and he heard her sharp intake of breath. "So he's still out there, still a threat." "We're increasing security," Ramirez said. "I'm assigning a second officer to watch the house, and I want you both to stay inside unless absolutely necessary. No exceptions." "For how long?" Luke asked. "Until we find him. Could be days, could be weeks. I'm sorry, but that's the reality." After Ramirez left, Luke and Grace stood in the living room, the weight of the situation settling over them. Outside, the news van was still parked down the street, waiting for something to happen. Inside, they were trapped, unable to move forward or go back. "I need to call Maddie's school," Luke said finally. "Make sure they know not to release her to anyone except me or Carol, and I need to figure out what to tell her about all of this." "She deserves to know the truth," Grace said quietly, "or at least an age-appropriate version of it. She's smart, Luke. She'll know something's wrong if you try to hide it." Luke knew she was right. When Carol brought Maddie home that afternoon, Luke sat his daughter down at the kitchen table while Grace waited in the bedroom, giving them privacy. "Maddie, I need to talk to you about something serious." His daughter's expression immediately became worried. "Are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart, but remember how I told you that Grace is staying with us because she got hurt? Well, the person who hurt her is still out there, and the police are looking for him. Until they find him, we need to be extra careful." "What kind of careful?" "The kind where you don't leave school with anyone except me or Grandma. Where you tell a teacher right away if you see anyone strange or if anyone asks you questions about Grace. And where you stay inside the house, more than usual." Maddie processed this, her young face serious. "Is Grace in danger? Are we in danger?" Luke wanted to lie, to tell her everything was fine, but he'd never lied to Maddie, and he wasn't about to start now. "The police think we're safe, and they're watching the house to make sure. But yes, there's some danger. That's why we're being careful. Because Grace is part of our family now, and we protect family." "Exactly," Maddie nodded slowly. "Okay, I can be careful. I'm good at following rules." "I know you are, kiddo, and I'm so proud of you for being brave about this." That evening, the four of them, Luke, Maddie, Grace, and Carol, who decided to stay for dinner, sat around the kitchen table again. The mood was subdued, everyone aware of the police cruisers outside and the news van that hadn't left. But Maddie insisted on working on her Jupiter project with Grace, and watching the two of them bent over construction paper and glue sticks, something in Luke's chest loosened slightly. "Did you know that Jupiter has 79 moons?" Grace was saying. "Scientists keep discovering new ones." 79! That's so many. Earth only has one and it's boring. "Hey, our moon is not boring. It controls the tides and gives us moonlight." "Yeah, but 79 is cooler." Carol caught Luke's eye and smiled. "She's good with her," she said quietly. "Grace?" "She's good with Maddie." "Yeah," Luke agreed. "She is." After Carol left and Maddie was in bed, Luke found Grace standing at the living room window, carefully peeking through the curtains at the street outside. "Reporters are still there," she said, "and now there are 2 police cars. This is going to make the news, isn't it? Mystery billionaire hiding in small-town mechanic's house. Probably. Your life is never going to be the same. You know that, right? After this, even after Marcus is caught, people will remember. They'll talk. Maddie might face questions at school. You might lose business. Grace. Luke came to stand beside her. Stop. You're catastrophizing. I'm being realistic. No, you're letting fear make decisions for you. Yes, things are complicated right now. Yes, our lives have gotten messy. But we're going to get through this. And on the other side, you're going to go back to running your company, and Maddie and I are going to go back to our normal lives. Maybe we'll stay in touch. Maybe we won't. But right now, in this moment, we're here, we're safe. And that's enough. Grace turned away from the window to look at him. Is it enough? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning Luke wasn't sure he was ready to unpack. There was something happening between them, something more than gratitude or obligation. He'd felt it when she held Maddie, when she laughed at dinner, when she took his hand earlier. A connection that went beyond circumstances. Yeah, Luke said finally. It's enough. But even as he said it, he wondered if he was lying to both of them. The next 3 days fell into a strange routine. Luke couldn't go to work. Leaving the house would mean leaving Grace and Maddie unprotected, and he wasn't willing to risk that. Jerry was understanding, telling him to take all the time he needed, but Luke knew that couldn't last forever. Bills didn't pause for emergencies. Grace worked from the laptop, coordinating with her trusted board members and trying to maintain some control over Lennox Industries from a distance. The responses she'd gotten to her encrypted emails had been encouraging. Her allies on the board were horrified by what Marcus had done and were quietly working to freeze him out of major decisions until Grace could return. Maddie continued going to school, but Carol started homeschooling her at Luke's house instead, not wanting to risk the commute or exposure at school. The Jupiter project grew more elaborate each day, with Grace adding details that Maddie eagerly incorporated. They built a scale model of Jupiter's moons, researched the composition of the Great Red Spot, and even created a presentation about the Galilean moons. You're going to give every other kid's project a run for their money, Luke told them, watching as they carefully painted Eo's volcanic surface on a styrofoam ball. That's the point, Dad, Maddie said seriously. We're going for the win. Competitive? I like it, Grace said with a grin. The reporters outside multiplied. By day 3, there were 4 news vans and countless photographers with long lenses trained on Luke's house. Detective Ramirez had to push back against demands for statements, and Luke's phone was flooded with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. He stopped answering entirely. But the pressure was building. Luke could feel it in the way Grace grew quieter as the days passed, in the tension in his shoulders that never quite released, in Maddie's occasional questions about when things would go back to normal. On the 4th morning, Luke woke to find Grace in the kitchen at 5 a.m., staring at her laptop screen with tears streaming down her face. Grace, what's wrong? She looked up at him, devastated. Marcus, he gave an interview to the press. He's claiming I embezzled money from the company, that I'm mentally unstable, that I attacked him when he confronted me about it. He has documents, forged documents, but they look real, that show money being transferred to accounts in my name. Luke came to read over her shoulder. The article was on the homepage of a major business news site, complete with a photo of Marcus looking concerned and professional. The headline read, Lennox Industries CEO missing after embezzlement allegations surface. This is a lie, Luke said. All of it. The police know the truth. Your board members know the truth. But the public doesn't. And in business, perception is reality. Marcus is destroying my reputation while I'm hiding in your house. By the time the truth comes out, it might be too late. Grace closed the laptop, her hand shaking. I need to fight back. I need to make a statement, go public with what really happened. Ramirez said, I know what Ramirez said, but this is my life, Luke, my company, my reputation, everything I've built. I can't let Marcus take it without fighting back. Later, when Detective Ramirez showed up with news. We found Marcus. He's in custody. The relief that flooded through Luke was so intense he had to sit down. Grace grabbed the back of a chair, her knuckles white. Where? She asked. How? Border Patrol picked him up trying to cross into Canada with fake documents. He's being extradited back to Millbrook as we speak. With your testimony, Grace, and the evidence we've gathered from Lennox Industries, we have enough to charge him with attempted murder, embezzlement, and about a dozen other crimes." Grace's legs seemed to give out, and Luke caught her before she could fall, helping her to the couch. She was crying again, but this time with relief. "It's over," she whispered. "It's actually over." "Not quite," Ramirez cautioned. "He's going to have expensive lawyers, and this is going to be a long legal battle. But yes, the immediate danger is over. You're safe now." After Ramirez left with plans to take Grace's official statement the next day, the house felt different, lighter. The weight that had been pressing down on all of them for days had lifted, and Luke felt like he could breathe fully for the first time since he'd found Grace on that highway. Maddie came running down the stairs, having heard the commotion. "Did they catch the bad guy?" "They caught him," Luke confirmed, pulling his daughter into a hug. "You're safe. We're all safe." "Does that mean Grace can stay?" The question caught both adults off guard. Luke looked at Grace, who looked back at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Grace started, then stopped. "I don't know, Maddie. I have a company to run, a life to get back to." "But you like it here, don't you? With us?" "I love it here, more than you know." "Then why leave?" It was such a simple question, asked with the uncomplicated logic of childhood. Why leave a place where you're happy, where you're loved, where you belong? Luke wanted to hear Grace's answer, but before she could respond, his phone rang. It was Jerry. "Luke, thank God, I just saw the news. Is it true? They got the guy who attacked Grace Lennox?" "Yeah, it's true. He's in custody." "That's incredible. Listen, I don't want it to add pressure, but we're swamped at the shop. Any chance you can come back to work soon?" Reality crashed back in. Luke had a life, responsibilities, bills to pay. This strange interlude, this week of living with Grace, of feeling like they were a unit, a family, had been just that, an interlude. Now it was time to return to real life. "I'll be there Monday," Luke promised. The weekend passed in a blur. Grace worked with Detective Ramirez and prosecutors to build the case against Marcus. The story exploded in the media, the real story this time, with Grace issuing a carefully worded statement that she was safe and that Marcus Vance would face justice for his crimes. The forged documents Marcus had presented were quickly debunked, and the tide of public opinion shifted dramatically in Grace's favor. By Sunday evening, Grace's board had reached out to beg her to return to Seattle, to take back control of Lennox Industries before the shareholders panicked any further. She had conference calls scheduled, flights to arrange, lawyers to meet with. She was leaving. They all knew it, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. Sunday night, after Maddie was asleep, Luke and Grace sat on his back porch, watching the stars. The reporters had finally left, and the police had reduced security now that Marcus was in custody. It was quiet, peaceful, almost like that whole nightmare hadn't happened. "I owe you my life," Grace said softly. "I owe you more than that. You gave me a family when I needed one most. You reminded me what really matters. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do, and I always pay my debts." Grace turned to face him. "Come with me. To Seattle. You and Maddie. I'll set you up with your own garage better than anything you could have here. Maddie can go to the best schools. You'll never have to worry about money again." Luke's heart clenched. Part of him wanted to say yes immediately, to grab this lifeline out of his struggling existence and give Maddie everything he'd never been able to provide. But another part, a bigger part, knew it would be wrong. "Grace, I can't let you do that." "Why not?" "Because Maddie and we're not a charity case. We're not a debt you need to repay. What we did because it was right. Because we care about you, not because we expected anything in return. I know that, but I'm offering because I care about you too, both of you. I don't want to leave and never see you again. I don't want to go back to my empty life and pretend this week didn't change everything." "Then don't," Luke said. "Don't go back to empty. Build something real, but do it because that's what you want, not because you feel obligated to us." Grace was quiet for a long moment. "What if what I want is you, both of you? What if this week wasn't just about surviving, but about finding something I didn't even know I was missing?" Luke's breath caught. He'd been trying so hard not to think about the growing feelings he had for Grace, to tell himself it was just circumstance, adrenaline, gratitude. But hearing her voice, what he'd been afraid to admit, made it real. "Grace, I'm not asking you to decide tonight," she said quickly. "I know this is complicated, that we barely know each other outside of crisis mode, but I'm asking you to think about it. Please, think about what we could build together if we gave ourselves the chance." Luke wanted to say yes. God, he wanted to say yes. But his life was here, his job, his friends, Maddie's school, his mother-in-law who helped him every single day. Could he really uproot all of that for a woman he'd known for less than 2 weeks? "I'll think about it," he promised. "But Grace, you need to understand something. I'm not looking for a savior or a fairy godmother. If there's going to be something between us, it needs to be real, equal, not you rescuing me. I don't want to rescue you, Luke. I want to build a life with you. There's a difference." They sat in silence after that, both knowing that everything was about to change, but neither sure exactly how. The next morning, a car arrived to take Grace to the airport. She'd arranged for a private flight back to Seattle, and her assistant had sent clothes and necessities so she didn't have to return wearing Luke's borrowed sweatpants. She looked like the CEO again, perfectly styled, professionally dressed, every inch the powerful woman who ran a billion-dollar empire. But when Maddie ran to hug her goodbye, Grace knelt down despite her still healing ribs and held Luke's daughter like she might never let go. "Thank you for sharing your family with me," Grace whispered. "You're part of it now," Maddie said firmly. "Distance doesn't change that." No, it doesn't." Grace stood and turned to Luke. They'd said their private goodbyes earlier, but standing here in the morning light with her about to leave felt different. Final. "Call me," she said. "Even if it's just to talk. Even if you decide Seattle isn't for you, call me." "I will." She reached up and kissed his cheek, lingering just long enough for him to breathe in her perfume, something expensive and subtle that would haunt him for days. Then she was gone, sliding into the back of the black car that whisked her away to the airport and back to her real life. Luke and Maddie stood in the driveway, watching until the car disappeared around the corner. The house felt empty in a way it hadn't before Grace arrived, like they'd gotten used to the extra presence, the extra warmth, and now had to adjust all over again to it being just the two of them. "She'll come back," Maddie said confidently, "or we'll go to her. Families don't let distance get in the way." Luke hoped his daughter was right. He really, really hoped she was right. The first week after Grace left felt like walking through fog. Luke went back to work at Morrison's auto shop, sliding under cars and losing himself in the familiar rhythm of wrenches and oil changes, but his mind kept drifting to Seattle. To Grace, sitting in some glass-walled office, making decisions that affected thousands of lives, surrounded by people in expensive suits who'd never know what it was like to find someone broken on the side of a highway and choose to stop. Jerry noticed, of course. On Wednesday afternoon, he found Luke staring at a carburetor like it held the secrets of the universe. "You've been looking at that thing for 20 minutes, Jerry said. "Either it's the most fascinating carburetor in history, or your head's somewhere else." Luke set down his wrench. "Sorry, I'll focus." "That's not what I'm saying." Jerry pulled up a work stool and sat down with a grunt. "Look, I've known you for 10 years. I've seen you work through grief, through financial hardship, through single parenthood. I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" "Like part of you is missing. Like you left something important behind and you're trying to convince yourself you don't need it." Luke opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. What was the point? Jerry was right. "She asked me to come to Seattle," Luke admitted. "Her and Maddie both. New life, new opportunities, everything." "And you said no." "I said I'd think about it. But Jerry, my whole life is here. This job, this town, Carol. I can't just pick up and leave." "Why not?" The question was so simple, so direct that Luke didn't have an immediate answer. Because people don't just do that. You don't uproot your entire existence for someone you've known for 2 weeks. "Your wife and I were married 6 weeks after we met," Jerry said quietly. "Everyone said we were crazy, said it wouldn't last. We had 43 years together before she passed, and I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. Sometimes you just know, Luke. Sometimes the timeline doesn't matter." Luke swallowed hard. "What if I'm wrong? What if I go to Seattle and it doesn't work out? Then I've disrupted Maddie's whole life for nothing. And what if you don't go and spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been? Which regret can you live with better? That question haunted Luke for the rest of the week. At home, Maddie was subdued, missing Grace in ways she tried to hide but couldn't quite manage. She'd finished the Jupiter project. It was spectacular, easily the best in her class. But when Luke praised her for it, she just shrugged. Grace helped with most of it. It doesn't feel right taking all the credit. They talked to Grace on the phone every night. Short calls at first, just checking in, but they grew longer as the days passed. Grace would tell them about her day, the meetings, the press conferences, the slow process of rebuilding trust with her board and the public. She sounded exhausted but energized, like she'd found her footing again. But Luke could hear something else in her voice too, a loneliness that matched his own. "How's Seattle treating you?" he asked on Friday night, Maddie already asleep upstairs. "Lonely," Grace admitted. "I'm staying in a hotel until I figure out my living situation. Marcus had keys to my apartment, and even though he's in jail, I can't go back there. Too many memories." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'll find a new place, something fresh, maybe something with a little more warmth than my old apartment had." She paused. "Luke, have you thought about what I asked? About coming here?" He had. God, he'd thought about almost nothing else. "Yeah, I've been thinking about it." And I'm scared, terrified actually, of making the wrong choice, of hurting Maddie, of failing you. "You could never fail me. You saved my life, Luke. Everything else is just details." "It's not, though. It's our lives. Mine and Maddie's. I need to be sure I'm making decisions for the right reasons, not just because I'm grateful or because you're offering us a better financial situation." Grace was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "What would the right reasons be?" Luke closed his eyes, thinking. "Because I can't stop thinking about you. Because Maddie talks about you like you've always been part of our family. Because when you left, the house felt empty in a way it hasn't since my wife died. Because I think I'm falling in love with you, and that terrifies me more than anything else." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Luke thought the call had dropped. Then Grace's voice came through, thick with emotion. "I'm falling in love with you too. With both of you. And you're right, it's terrifying. But Luke, I've spent my whole life playing it safe in my personal life, keeping people at arm's length, never letting anyone get too close. Then you stopped on a highway in the middle of the night, and everything changed. I don't want to go back to safe. I want to go forward to real." Luke's heart was pounding. "Grace, you don't have to answer now. I know you need time. But please, just don't say no out of fear. Say no because it's truly not what you want. Okay?" "Okay." After they hung up, Luke sat in the dark living room for a long time, thinking about fear and faith, about staying and leaving, about the life he had versus the life he might have. He pulled out his wallet and extracted the letter Grace had sent 3 years ago after Maddie's surgery. The paper was worn now, creased from being folded and unfolded so many times. "I believe every child deserves a chance at life." Grace had given Maddie that chance once. Now she was offering them both a chance at something more. Was he brave enough to take it? The weekend brought a complication Luke hadn't anticipated. On Saturday morning, Detective Ramirez called with news about Marcus Vance's case. "His lawyers are pushing for a plea deal," she said. "They want to plead down from attempted murder to aggravated assault, reduce the embezzlement charges. The DA is considering it to avoid a lengthy trial." Luke's grip tightened on his phone. "That's not justice. He tried to kill her." "I know, but trials are expensive and unpredictable. The DA thinks a guaranteed conviction on lesser charges is better than risking an acquittal on the bigger ones. Grace needs to be here for the hearing on Tuesday. Her testimony could make the difference in whether the DA accepts the plea or pushes for trial." Luke immediately called Grace. She answered on the first ring, and he could hear the tension in her voice before she even spoke. "I know. The prosecutor called me an hour ago. I'm flying back Monday night." "Where are you staying?" "Hotel, probably. I don't want to impose—" "You're staying with us," Luke said firmly. "No arguments. You shouldn't be alone during this." "Luke, are you sure? I don't want to disrupt your lives again." "Grace, you're not a disruption. You're—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Your family. That's what Maddie said, and she was right. Family shows up when it matters. Let us show up for you. The relief in Grace's voice was palpable. Thank you. I'll let you know when my flight gets in. Maddie was thrilled when Luke told her Grace was coming back, even if just for a few days. She immediately started planning what they'd cook for dinner, whether Grace would want to see her room again, if they could watch movies together like before.
Dad, Maddie said as they cleaned the house Sunday afternoon, do you think Grace misses us as much as we miss her? Luke paused in the middle of vacuuming. Yeah, kiddo, I think she does. Then why doesn't she just come back? Or why don't we just go to her? If everyone wants to be together, why are we pretending we don't? The wisdom of 8-year-olds was sometimes devastating in its simplicity. It's complicated, sweetheart. Adults always say that when they're making something harder than it needs to be. Maddie crossed her arms. You love her. She loves us. That's not complicated. How do you know I love her? Because you look at her the way moms in your pictures, the ones from before I was born, happy and scared and excited all at once, and because you keep checking your phone to see if she texted, and because you've been sad since she left even though you try to hide it. Luke sat down on the couch, pulling his daughter beside him. You're too smart for your own good. I know. So what are we going to do about it? I don't know yet, but I promise you, whatever I decide, you'll be part of that decision, okay? Okay, but just so you know, I vote for Seattle. I looked it up online with Grandma. They have this really cool aquarium and mountains and everything. Plus, Grace is there. Noted, Luke said with a small smile. Grace's flight landed Monday evening at 7:30. Luke picked her up from the airport, and the moment he saw her walking through the terminal, his heart did something complicated in his chest. She looked tired, exhausted really, but she lit up when she spotted him. They didn't hug immediately. There was a moment of awkwardness, both of them suddenly unsure of the boundaries after 2 weeks apart. Then Grace stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, and Luke held her like he'd been wanting to since she left. I missed you, she whispered against his shoulder. We missed you too. The drive back to Luke's house was filled with conversation. Grace updating him on Lennox Industries, the slow process of rooting out Marcus's accomplices, the media circus that had followed her return to Seattle. Luke told her about work, about Maddie's Jupiter project winning first place in her class, about the quiet rhythm of their days without her in them. It's been strange, Luke admitted, getting used to you being gone after getting used to you being there. I know what you mean. My hotel room feels empty. Everything feels empty. At the house, Maddie launched herself at Grace the moment she walked through the door. Grace caught her, laughing despite the obvious exhaustion, and held her tight. I have so much to tell you, Maddie said. My project won, and Emma said it was the best one she'd ever seen, and Mrs. Patterson asked if you helped because it was so good, and I said yes because you did, and Maddie, breathe, Luke said with a laugh. Let Grace get inside first. They settled into that familiar routine so easily it was almost frightening. Grace in Luke's room again. She'd insisted she could take the couch, but Luke had refused. Maddie chattering through dinner about everything Grace had missed. The three of them on the couch afterward, watching a movie that none of them were really paying attention to because it felt too good just being together again. After Maddie went to bed, Luke and Grace sat in the kitchen over coffee, the house quiet around them. I'm nervous about tomorrow, Grace admitted. Facing Marcus in court, even just for a hearing. Part of me is terrified he'll somehow get away with everything. He won't. You're stronger than he ever gave you credit for, and now everyone knows what he did. He doesn't have power over you anymore. I hope you're right. Grace wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. Luke, I've been thinking a lot about what you said on the phone, about being scared of making the wrong choice. Yeah? I'm scared too. I'm scared of pushing you too hard, of asking for something you're not ready to give. But I'm more scared of not trying at all, of letting fear keep us apart when we could have something real. She met his eyes. So I need to know, is there any part of you that wants to try? To see if this thing between us could actually work? Luke had spent 2 weeks thinking about this question from every angle. He'd made lists of pros and cons, talked to Jerry, even had a long conversation with Carol that had ended with her saying, Honey, you can't logic your way through matters of the heart. Sometimes you just have to jump. Yes, he said finally. "There's a big part of me that wants to try. But Grace, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. I'm a package deal. Maddie comes first, always. I don't have money or status or anything impressive to offer you. I'm just a mechanic from a small town who's trying his best to be a good dad. Luke Warren, you stopped on a highway in the middle of the night to help a stranger. You brought her into your home, protected her, made her feel like she mattered when she felt completely alone. You raised a daughter so kind and brave that she offered to share her family with someone she'd never met. You are the most impressive person I've ever met, and I would be honored. Honored if you'd let me be part of your life." Luke's throat tightened with emotion. "When you put it that way," Grace smiled, but it was tentative, hopeful. "So is that a yes? You'll at least think seriously about Seattle?" "It's a yes to thinking about it, really thinking about it, not just being scared. And it's a yes to seeing where this goes between us, even if we're doing it long distance at first." "That's enough. More than enough." Grace reached across the table and took his hand. "We'll figure out the rest as we go." They sat like that for a while, hands linked across Luke's worn kitchen table, both of them knowing that something significant had shifted, but neither quite ready to name it yet. The courthouse on Tuesday morning was intimidating. All marble columns and serious-faced people in suits. Luke had taken the day off work to be there, and Carol had agreed to keep Maddie home from school. This wasn't something his daughter needed to witness. Grace sat between Luke and her lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who'd flown in from Seattle specifically for this hearing. On the other side of the courtroom, Marcus Vance sat with his own team of lawyers, looking nothing like the violent criminal he was. He'd cleaned up well, expensive suit, hair perfectly styled, an expression of mild concern that probably played well for the judge. When Marcus's eyes found Grace, Luke saw her stiffen. He reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently. She squeezed back, hard enough that his fingers went numb, but he didn't let go. The hearing itself was procedural, technical, full of legal language that Luke struggled to follow. But the core issue was clear. Marcus's lawyers wanted the plea deal. The prosecution was presenting it to the judge for approval. If the judge accepted it, Marcus would serve maybe 5 years instead of the 20 to life he deserved. Grace was called to make a victim impact statement. Luke watched her stand, watched her walk to the front of the courtroom with her head high despite the tremor in her hands. When she began to speak, her voice was steady and clear. "Your Honor, Marcus Vance didn't just attack me physically. He tried to destroy everything I'd built over 15 years. He stole from the company we built together, betrayed the trust of thousands of employees, and then tried to murder me when I discovered his crimes. I still have nightmares about that night, about the feeling of being helpless, of thinking I was going to die alone in some warehouse. If Luke Warren hadn't found me when he did, if he hadn't stopped to help a stranger on a dark road, I would be dead. Marcus Vance tried to kill me, and I don't believe he feels any remorse for that. A plea deal that treats this as anything less than attempted murder is not justice. It's a betrayal of every person he hurt, every life he tried to destroy." The courtroom was silent when she finished. Even Marcus looked shaken, his composure finally cracking. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, studied the paperwork in front of her for a long moment. Then she looked up at the prosecution. "I'm rejecting the plea agreement. This case goes to trial. The charges stand as filed: attempted murder, embezzlement, conspiracy. We'll set a trial date within the next 60 days. She turned her attention to Marcus. "Mr. Vance, you will remain in custody without bail. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down, and Luke heard Grace's sharp intake of breath beside him. Patricia Chen was already on her feet, shaking hands with the prosecutor, but Grace just stood there, trembling. "You did it," Luke said quietly. "He's going to trial. Real justice." Grace turned to him, and he saw tears streaming down her face. "I was so scared he'd get away with it." "He's not getting away with anything. Not anymore." They left the courthouse together, Grace leaning on Luke more than was strictly necessary, but neither of them caring. Outside, reporters swarmed, shouting questions, but Patricia Chen handled them with practiced ease while Luke guided Grace to his truck. In the relative privacy of the vehicle, Grace finally let herself fall apart. She cried, deep,
shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and wounded. Luke held her, not saying anything because there was nothing to say, just being present while she released everything she'd been holding in. "I'm sorry," she said eventually, pulling back and wiping her eyes. "I don't usually fall apart like this." "You're allowed. After everything you've been through, you're allowed." Grace laughed wetly. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" "Years of practice with an 8-year-old. They're surprisingly good at teaching you emotional intelligence." They drove back to Luke's house where Maddie and Carol were waiting anxiously. Maddie took one look at Grace's tear-stained face and hugged her without asking questions. Carol made tea. And slowly, as they sat around the kitchen table, Grace recounted what had happened at the courthouse. "So he's going to actual trial?" Carol asked. "With a real jury and everything?" "Yes. It'll be months from now, and I'll have to testify again, but yes. He's going to face real consequences." Grace looked around the table at the three of them. "I couldn't have done that without you, without knowing I had people in my corner who believed me." "Of course we believe you," Maddie said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "Your family." Later that evening, after Carol had gone home and Maddie was in bed, Luke found Grace standing in his backyard looking up at the stars. It was a clear night, cold enough to see their breath, but she didn't seem to notice. "Penny for your thoughts," Luke said, coming to stand beside her. "I was just thinking about how different my life looks now than it did a month ago. A month ago, I was so focused on the company, on success, on proving I didn't need anyone. I thought I had everything figured out." She turned to face him. "Then Marcus tried to kill me, and everything I thought I knew got turned upside down. And in the middle of that nightmare, I found something I didn't even know I was looking for." "What's that?" "Home. Not a place, but a feeling. The feeling of being somewhere you belong, with people who see you, really see you, and love you anyway." Grace stepped closer. "Luke, I know I said I'd give you time to think about Seattle, but I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it." "Okay." "I don't need you to move to Seattle. I can run Linux Industries from anywhere with the right technology. I have good people in place, board members I trust. What I really need, is to be with you and Maddie. Whether that's in Seattle or Millbrook or anywhere else doesn't matter. You are what matters." Luke's heart was pounding. "Are you saying you'd move here? To Millbrook?" "I'm saying I'd move anywhere if it meant being with you. I've had success. I've had money and power and all the things I thought would make me happy. But I've never had what I have when I'm with you. Peace, joy, love. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." Luke pulled her close, and this time when their lips met, it wasn't tentative or uncertain. It was a promise, a commitment, a choice they were both making with full knowledge of what it meant. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Luke rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have all the answers yet," he said. "I don't know if Seattle or Millbrook or somewhere completely different makes the most sense, but I know I want to figure it out together. No more being apart, no more long-distance calls that leave us both feeling empty. We're in this together now." "Together," Grace agreed. "I like the sound of that." They stood in Luke's backyard under the stars, holding each other, both of them knowing that life was about to get complicated in entirely new ways. There would be logistics to figure out, decisions to make, a whole life to build from the ground up. But for the first time in weeks, maybe for the first time in years, Luke felt something that had nothing to do with fear or obligation or just getting through the day. He felt hope. Inside the house, Maddie had crept to her window and was watching her father and Grace in the backyard, their figures silhouetted against the night sky. She smiled to herself, already mentally planning how to arrange her stuffed animals in whatever new room they'd end up in, whether it was in Seattle or here or somewhere else entirely. Because that's what families did, she thought. They figured things out together. They adapted. They made it work. And they were a family now, the three of them. Unconventional, unexpected, born out of tragedy and midnight highways and impossible choices, but real. More real than anything else. Maddie crawled back into bed, pulled her covers up to her chin, and whispered a prayer of thanks to the universe for bringing the angel lady into their lives. For her dad, who'd been brave enough to stop on a dark road. For second chances and new beginnings, and all the beautiful, complicated possibilities that came with them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, everyone she loved was safe and together, and that was more than enough. The morning after the courthouse hearing brought a clarity Luke hadn't expected. He woke early, the house still quiet, and found Grace already awake in the kitchen, her laptop open and a cup of coffee growing cold beside her. She looked up when he entered, and the smile that crossed her face was tired but genuine. "Couldn't sleep?" Luke asked, pouring himself coffee and sitting across from her. "Too much going on in here." Grace tapped her temple. "I've been thinking about what I said last night, about moving, about making this work. I meant every word, Luke, but I also need to be realistic. I can't just abandon Lennox Industries, not with everything that's happened. The board needs stability. The employees need reassurance. I know, I wasn't expecting you to just walk away from everything you built. But I also can't keep living in hotels and flying back and forth between Seattle and here. That's not sustainable, and it's not fair to any of us." Grace closed her laptop and gave him her full attention. "So I have a proposal, an actual thought-out plan instead of just emotional declarations in the backyard." Luke smiled despite himself. "I'm listening." "Lennox Industries needs a satellite office. We've been talking about expanding our East Coast presence for years, but never had the right catalyst. What if I established a regional headquarters somewhere between Seattle and Millbrook? Portland, maybe. Or even closer. There are cities within a few hours of here that could work. I'd still travel to Seattle regularly, but my primary base would be closer. Close enough that we could see each other every weekend at minimum. Close enough that this doesn't feel impossible." Luke considered this. "That's a big move for the company. Would the board approve it?" "After everything with Marcus, the board will approve anything I say makes strategic sense. And this does. We've been losing contracts to competitors on the East Coast because we don't have a strong presence here. This solves a business problem while also solving a personal one." Grace reached across the table. "But I need to know if that's enough for you. If having me a few hours away instead of across the country is something you can work with while we figure out the long-term plan." Before Luke could answer, Maddie's voice called from upstairs. "Dad! Grace? Are you guys awake?" "Kitchen!" Luke called back. Maddie appeared moments later, still in her pajamas, her hair a wild tangle around her face. She looked between the two adults and immediately zeroed in on their joined hands across the table. "Are you guys talking about the future?" she asked, sliding into a chair. "Because I have opinions." Grace laughed. "Of course you do. Let's hear them." "Okay, so here's what I think." Maddie folded her hands on the table like she was presenting a business proposal. "Grace needs to be close to her company because it's important, and she worked really hard on it. Dad needs to be here because of his job and Grandma. I need to be wherever both of you are because you're my family now. So the answer is obvious. We need to find a place where all three of those things work." "And how do we do that?" Luke asked, curious where his daughter was going with this. "Grace starts her new office somewhere close. Like she was just saying, I heard you guys talking. Dad, you open your own garage like you've always wanted instead of working for Mr. Morrison. I know you've been saving money for that. And I go to whatever school is near where we end up. Grandma can visit, and we can visit her." Problem solved. Luke and Grace exchanged glances, out of the mouths of babes, as they said. "It's not quite that simple, sweetheart," Luke started, but Maddie cut him off. "Why not? Grown-ups always make things complicated when they don't need to be. You love each other. We want to be together. Everything else is just details." Grace was trying not to laugh. Luke could tell. "She makes a compelling argument." "She usually does." Luke looked at his daughter. "Maddie, opening my own garage takes a lot of money, more than I have saved, and it's risky. What if it fails?" "Then you try again. That's what you always tell me when I'm scared to try something new, that failing just means you learned what doesn't work." Maddie turned to Grace. "And you have a lot of money, right? So if Dad needs help starting his garage, you could help him, like he helped you when you needed it." "Maddie, that's not," Luke began, but Grace spoke over him. "Actually, that's not a bad idea. Not a gift or charity," she added quickly, seeing Luke's expression. "A business investment. I invest in your garage, you pay me back with interest once it's profitable. It's what investors do, Luke, and I'm very good at identifying solid business opportunities." "I'm not taking your money to start a business," Luke said firmly. "Why not? You took my money to save Maddie's life." "That was different. That was life.
or death. And this is life or existence. There's a difference. Grace leaned forward. Luke, I've watched you work. Jerry's told me stories about how you've built up his client base, how people specifically request you because you're honest and skilled. You could build something incredible if you had the resources. Let me be part of that, not as a savior or a benefactor, but as a partner. Luke wanted to argue, but looking between Grace and Maddie, both of them watching him with identical expressions of determination, he felt his resistance crumbling. Maybe they were right. Maybe he'd been so focused on maintaining his independence that he'd forgotten the value of accepting help when it was offered freely and without strings. I'll think about it, he said finally. But we do this right.
Contracts, repayment terms, everything official. I won't be anyone's charity case. Deal, Grace said immediately. The conversation was interrupted by Luke's phone ringing. Jerry's name appeared on the screen. Morning, boss, Luke answered. Luke, we've got a situation here. Jerry's voice was tense. There's a reporter outside the shop asking questions about you and Grace Lennox. Pretty aggressive about it, too. I've told him to leave 3 times, but he's not budging. I'm about 2 seconds from calling the cops. Luke's jaw tightened. I'll be right there. After hanging up, he explained the situation to Grace. Her face went pale. This is my fault. The trial announcement yesterday, your name came up in the press coverage. Someone must have connected the dots about you being the one who found me. It's not your fault. It's the price of living in a world where everyone thinks they're entitled to everyone else's story. Luke stood. I need to handle this before it gets worse. I'm coming with you, Grace said. Grace, you don't need to... Yes, I do. If this reporter wants a story about us, he's going to get the truth. From both of us, together. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to Morrison's auto shop to find a man with a camera and a voice recorder standing near the entrance, trying to interview a very annoyed-looking Jerry. The moment the reporter saw Luke's truck, he pivoted toward them. Mr. Warren, can you comment on your relationship with Grace Lennox? Is it true you're being compensated for providing her protection? Can you verify the allegations that... Stop, Grace said, stepping out of the truck with an authority that made the reporter actually pause. I'm Grace Lennox. If you want a statement, you'll get it from me directly, and then you'll leave Mr. Warren and his workplace alone. Do we have an agreement? The reporter's eyes lit up. This was better than he'd hoped for, an actual interview with Grace Lennox herself. Yes, absolutely. Ms. Lennox, can you confirm that you've been staying with Luke Warren? I can confirm that Luke Warren saved my life when he found me on Highway 14 last month. I can also confirm that he and his daughter have shown me more kindness and genuine humanity than I've experienced in years. Any suggestion that he's profiting from my situation or that there's anything inappropriate about our friendship is not only false, but deeply insulting to a man who risked his own safety to help a stranger. But surely there's more to the story than... The only story here is that good people still exist in the world. People who stop when they see someone in trouble. People who open their homes and their hearts without asking for anything in return. That's not scandalous or newsworthy. It's just human decency. Now you have your statement. I expect you to respect Mr. Warren's privacy and leave this property. The reporter tried to ask more questions, but Jerry had already pulled out his phone. I've got the sheriff on speed dial. You've got about 30 seconds before I make that call. The reporter left, though Luke suspected they hadn't seen the last of media interest. As his truck disappeared around the corner, Grace turned to Luke and Jerry. I'm sorry about that. I should have anticipated this. Not your fault, Jerry said. He extended his hand to Grace. Jerry Morrison. We spoke on the phone a few times, but never officially met. Thank you for standing up for Luke just now. Thank you for employing him for the past 10 years and being flexible when he needed it. Grace shook his hand firmly. Luke speaks very highly of you. Well, he's my best mechanic and a good man. Hard to find both in one package these days. Jerry glanced at Luke. Listen, I'm guessing there's more to discuss here than just aggressive reporters. Why don't you two use my office? I'll handle the front. In Jerry's cramped office that smelled like motor oil and coffee, Luke and Grace sat across from each other in worn chairs that had seen better days. This is going to keep happening, Luke said quietly. The media attention, the questions. Are you prepared for that? Are you? Grace countered. Because it's going to affect you more than me. I'm used to press coverage. But having reporters show up at your workplace, asking your friends and neighbors questions, that's invasive in a way I never wanted to bring into your life. We'll handle it. Together. Luke reached across the desk. But Grace, we need to be realistic about what this means. If we're really doing this, building a life together, we need to accept that there will be challenges. Media scrutiny, people making assumptions, maybe even threats from people who think I'm taking advantage of you financially. Let them think what they want. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters. Is it though? What about Maddie? She's 8. She doesn't need to be fielding questions from classmates about whether her dad is a gold digger. Grace flinched at the term. Do you really think people will say that? Some will. You're a billionaire, Grace. I'm a mechanic from a small town. There will always be people who assume the worst. They sat in heavy silence for a moment. Then Grace spoke, her voice quiet but determined. My whole life, I've let fear of what other people think dictate my choices. It's why I worked 80-hour weeks, why I never let anyone get close, why I built walls so high that even I couldn't see over them. Then Marcus tried to kill me, and I realized that all those walls didn't protect me from anything that actually mattered. You know what did protect me? You. A stranger who saw someone in trouble and chose to help without calculating the cost. I'm done living in fear of judgment, Luke. I'm done letting other people's opinions shape my life. Luke felt something shift in his chest. You're sure about this? About us? I've never been more sure of anything. Are you? He thought about the last month, the chaos, the fear, the media attention, all of it. Then he thought about Grace at his kitchen table, helping Maddie with her Jupiter project. Grace laughing at his terrible jokes. Grace fitting into his life like she'd always been meant to be there. Yeah, Luke said. I'm sure. They emerged from Jerry's office to find him working on a sedan, but he set down his wrench when he saw them. Everything sorted? Getting there, Luke said. Jerry, I need to talk to you about something. Can we speak privately? Grace took the hint and stepped outside, giving them space. Luke took a breath, then dove in. I'm thinking about opening my own garage. Nothing big, just a small operation to start. But I wanted to talk to you first, out of respect. You've been good to me for 10 years, and I don't want you to think I'm being disloyal. Jerry studied him for a long moment, then smiled. I was wondering when you'd finally get around to this. Luke, you should have done this years ago. You're too talented to be working for someone else forever. You're not upset? Upset? I'm relieved. I'm 67 years old, and I've been trying to figure out my exit strategy for years. My kids have no interest in taking over the shop, and I didn't want to sell to some corporate chain that would gut the place. But if you're opening your own garage, maybe we can work something out. I'll send overflow work your way. We refer clients to each other. Maybe eventually you buy my equipment when I retire. Could be good for both of us. Luke hadn't expected that. Jerry, I don't know what to say. Say you'll do it right. Build something you're proud of. And promise me you won't undercharge. I've seen your invoices, and you're way too cheap for the quality of work you provide. They talked for another 20 minutes, sketching out possibilities and timelines. By the time Luke left to collect Grace, his head was spinning with plans and potential. How'd it go? Grace asked as they climbed into his truck. Better than I expected. Jerry's actually excited about it. He even offered to help me get started. Luke pulled out of the parking lot, his mind racing. I can't believe I'm actually considering this. Why not? You're skilled, experienced, and you have people who believe in you. That's more than most businesses start with. Speaking of people who believe in me, Luke glanced at her. If I do this, if I take you up on your investment offer, I need it to be completely professional. Contracts, lawyers, the whole thing. I won't let money complicate what we're building. Agreed. And I meant what I said. This is an investment, not a gift. I expect returns. They spent the rest of the drive discussing logistics. Where Luke might open his garage, they'd need to research cities within a reasonable distance of wherever Grace established her regional office, what kind of services he'd offer, how much capital he'd need to start. It was exciting and terrifying in equal measure. At home, they found Maddie and Carol in the kitchen, baking cookies. The domestic scene was so normal, so perfect, that Luke paused in the doorway just to take it in. Dad, Grace, we're making chocolate chip cookies. Want to help? Always, Grace said, moving to wash her hands.
Carol pulled Luke aside while Maddie was distracted showing Grace the recipe. Everything okay? You look overwhelmed. I'm thinking about opening my own garage. Jerry's on board, Grace wants to invest, and it's all moving really fast. Is it moving too fast? Luke watched Grace help Maddie measure flour, both of them laughing when a puff of white powder exploded over the counter. No, for once in my life, I think the timing is exactly right. That evening, after cookies had been baked and consumed, after Carol had gone home and Maddie was in bed, Luke and Grace sat on his back porch again. It was becoming their spot, the place where they had the important conversations, where they were honest in ways that felt harder in the bright light of day. I talked to my board today, Grace said. During one of the calls this afternoon, I formally proposed the East Coast expansion. They're drawing up a feasibility study, but preliminary approval looks good. I could have a location scouted within a month. That fast? When you're the CEO and largest shareholder, things tend to move at whatever pace you set. Grace pulled her jacket tighter against the cold. There's something else. The prosecutor called. Marcus's lawyers are already trying to negotiate again, even after the judge rejected the plea deal. They're offering more information about his co-conspirators in exchange for a reduced sentence. What does your lawyer think? That it's worth considering if the information leads to more arrests. There were others involved in the embezzlement scheme, people at the company who looked the other way or actively helped Marcus hide what he was doing. Getting them held accountable matters. But part of me just wants this over with. I want to move forward without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next legal complication will arise. Grace turned to face him. Is that selfish? Wanting my own peace more than justice for others? It's human. You're allowed to want peace, Grace. You've been through hell. We've been through hell. You and Maddie, too. This has disrupted your entire lives. And made them immeasurably richer, Luke said firmly. Yes, it's been chaotic and scary and complicated. But Grace, you've brought something into our lives that was missing. Joy, possibility, the sense that the future could be bigger than we imagined. Grace's eyes filled with tears. You really mean that? Every word. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable and warm despite the autumn chill. Then Grace spoke again, her voice thoughtful. What do you think happens next? After we figure out the logistics, after the trial, after everything settles down? What does our life actually look like? Luke had been thinking about this question for weeks. I think it looks like Sunday morning pancakes and school projects. It looks like you traveling for work sometimes and coming home to us. It looks like me building a business I'm proud of while you do the same. It looks like Maddie growing up knowing she's loved by people who chose to be a family even when it was hard. It looks like normal, Grace. Beautifully, wonderfully normal. I've never had normal. I don't know if I even know how. Neither did I after Sarah died, but we figured it out, Maddie and me. We'll figure this out too. Grace leaned against him and Luke wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They stayed like that until the cold drove them inside, where Luke made hot chocolate and Grace raided his limited supply of tea, and they talked about everything and nothing until late into the night. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Grace flew back to Seattle to oversee the East Coast expansion project personally, but she returned to Millbrook every weekend. Luke began the process of setting up his business, filing paperwork, researching locations, meeting with accountants and lawyers. The investment agreement he and Grace drew up was thorough and professional, exactly what he'd insisted on. Maddie thrived in the chaos, adapting to the changes with the resilience of childhood. She video called Grace every night they weren't together, sharing everything from lunch menu complaints to elaborate plans for how she'd decorate Luke's new garage. I think you should have a waiting room with really comfortable chairs and magazines, but also maybe some toys for kids whose parents bring them. And a fish tank. Everyone likes fish tanks. Noted, Luke said, trying not to laugh at her seriousness. Carol watched it all with the wisdom of someone who'd lived through her own share of unexpected changes. One afternoon, she pulled Luke aside while Maddie was at a friend's house. You know Sarah would be happy for you, don't you? The statement caught Luke off guard. He and Carol rarely talked about Sarah directly. It was too painful for both of them. I hope so. I know so. My daughter loved you with her whole heart, and she would want you to be happy.
She would want Maddie to have a mother figure, even if that person came into your lives in the most unlikely way possible. Carol squeezed his hand. Grace is good for you, for both of you. Don't let guilt or fear keep you from embracing this. I'm trying not to. Try harder. Life's too short and precious to waste time on what-ifs. In early November, Grace called with news. We found it! The perfect location for the East Coast headquarters. It's in Portland, not Oregon, Maine. About 3 hours from Millbrook, close enough for weekends, far enough that we're not tripping over each other during the work week. Portland, Maine, Luke repeated, his mind already spinning. That could work. There's definitely a market for independent garages in that area. I thought you might say that, so I had my assistant do some research. Papers rustled on her end of the phone. There's a closed auto shop in South Portland that's been sitting empty for 6 months. The owner retired and his kids want to sell the property. It has all the basic equipment, good location, established client base that the owner would transfer to you. Want me to send you the listing? Luke's heart was pounding. Yes, absolutely yes. Already done. Check your email. Grace paused. Luke, this is really happening. We're actually doing this. Yeah, we really are. The garage in South Portland was perfect. Luke drove up with Jerry one Saturday to look at it, and he fell in love immediately. It was small but well-maintained with 3 bays, a decent waiting area, and even a small office. The equipment was older but functional. The location was ideal, residential neighborhood with good traffic flow, near enough to the highway to catch travelers who needed quick repairs. This is it, Luke said, standing in the middle of the empty garage and imagining it filled with his tools, his clients, his future. This is where I'm supposed to be. Jerry nodded approvingly. Good bones. You could do a lot with this place. And the price is reasonable, especially if Grace's investment can cover the initial purchase and first few months of operating costs. Luke made an offer that day. By the following week, it was accepted. Suddenly, everything was moving at light speed, contracts being signed, equipment being ordered, business licenses being filed. Grace's regional office was also moving forward, with construction beginning on a renovated warehouse building in Portland's Old Port District. In December, 3 months after Luke had found Grace on that dark highway, Marcus Vance's trial began. It lasted 2 weeks, with Grace testifying for an entire day. Luke took time off work to be there for every moment, sitting in the gallery while Grace recounted the attack, the betrayal, the fear of thinking she would die alone in that warehouse. Marcus's defense was weak, claiming it had all been a misunderstanding, that he'd never intended to hurt Grace, that the embezzlement was someone else's fault. The jury saw through it in less than 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Luke watched Grace's face as the verdict was read. She didn't celebrate or cry or show much reaction at all, just closed her eyes and took a deep breath like she'd been holding it for months and could finally let go. Outside the courthouse, away from the cameras and reporters, Grace finally allowed herself to break down. Luke held her while she cried tears of relief and release, knowing that this chapter of her life was finally, truly closed. It's over, she whispered. It's actually over. Now we get to start the next chapter, Luke said. The good one. 2 days before Christmas, Luke officially took ownership of his garage. He'd decided to name it Warren & Company Repairs. Simple, straightforward, exactly what it was. Grace had suggested something flashier, but Luke insisted he wanted his work to speak for itself. The grand opening was planned for early January, but Luke couldn't wait that long. He opened the doors on December 26th, and his first customer was a woman whose minivan had broken down on her way to visit family. Luke had her back on the road in 2 hours, refusing to charge her extra for holiday service. Just spreading good karma, he told Grace when she asked about it. Someone helped me when I needed it most. Time to pay that forward. Grace's regional office opened in February, a gleaming space filled with cutting-edge technology and innovative design. Luke attended the opening ceremony with Maddie, both of them dressed up and feeling out of place among the business executives and politicians. But Grace spotted them immediately and made a beeline across the room, ignoring everyone else. "You came," she said, pulling them both into a hug. "Of course we came," Maddie said. "This is your dream. Just like Dad's garage is his dream. We show up for dreams." The opening was a success. And Grace's decision to expand eastward was already paying dividends. New contracts were being signed, new employees hired, and the board was thrilled with the strategic move. But the best part, Grace told Luke later, was having an office that she could leave at 5 o'clock to drive home to them. Home was a house they'd found together in Cape Elizabeth, a coastal town between Portland and South Portland. It had 4 bedrooms, a big backyard, and a view of the ocean that made Maddie squeal with delight. They'd moved in March, with Carol driving up from Millbrook to help them unpack and declare the kitchen adequate for her cooking standards. "This is good," Carol said, looking around the sun-filled living room while Maddie raced around exploring every corner. "You've built something good here, Luke." "We've built something good," Luke corrected, pulling Grace close. "All of us together." Life settled into a new rhythm. Luke's garage grew steadily, building a reputation for honest work and fair prices. Grace's regional office exceeded projections, and she found that being 3 hours from Seattle gave her space to breathe, to be more than just her job. Maddie thrived in her new school, making friends easily and joining every after-school activity that caught her interest. They became a family in the small, daily ways that mattered most. Luke teaching Grace how to change a tire, even though she'd never need the skill. Grace helping Maddie with science projects and discovering she actually enjoyed homework more than board meetings. The 3 of them cooking dinner together, taking weekend trips to explore New England, building traditions that were uniquely theirs. One evening in late April, Luke found Grace on the deck of their house, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against him with a contented sigh. "What are you thinking about?" Luke asked. "How different my life is now. A year ago, I was sleeping in my office, eating takeout alone, measuring my worth by stock prices and quarterly earnings. Now I'm here, in this house, with you and Maddie, and I can't remember why any of those other things mattered so much." "They still matter. Lennox Industries matters. You should be proud of what you've built." "I am, but it's not everything anymore. It's just one part of a much bigger, better life." Grace turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you for stopping that night, for seeing me, for choosing to help, for letting me become part of your family. Thank you for saving Maddie's life, for being brave enough to trust us, for choosing this life when you could have had anything else." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, and somewhere in the house behind them, Maddie's laughter rang out as she video called her grandmother to share some piece of 8-year-old news that couldn't possibly wait until morning. This was their life now. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and full and built on a foundation of choosing each other every single day. Built on one man's decision to stop on a dark highway when he saw someone who needed help. Built on one woman's courage to accept that help and let herself be vulnerable enough to love again. In June, Jerry officially retired, selling his equipment to Luke, at a price so low it was basically a gift. He and his wife moved to Florida, but not before a party where Jerry made a speech about Luke being the finest mechanic and better man he'd ever known. "You took a chance on me 10 years ago," Luke said, shaking Jerry's hand. "I wouldn't be here without that. You would have ended up here no matter what. Some people are just destined for good things. You're one of them, Luke. Don't forget that." By July, Warren & Company Repairs needed to hire 2 additional mechanics to keep up with demand. Luke couldn't believe it. Less than a year in business, and he was already expanding. Grace's CFO recommended a friend from Seattle who was looking to relocate east, and Luke hired him on the spot after a trial week. "You've built something sustainable here," Grace told him, reviewing his business financials one evening after Maddie had gone to bed. "You'll be able to pay back my investment within 2 years at this rate. Maybe less." "About that," Luke took her hand. "I've been thinking about our investment arrangement." "Having second thoughts?" "Actually, yes. I don't want you as an investor anymore." Grace's face fell. "Oh, I understand if you want to maintain complete independence. I want you as a partner," Luke interrupted. "Not a silent investor, but an actual business partner. 50-50 ownership. We build this together, officially." "Luke, you don't have to do that. It's your garage, your dream." "It's our garage, our dream. Everything else in our lives we share. Why not this too?" He pulled out a folder he'd been hiding in his desk. "I had my lawyer draw up new partnership papers. Take a look. Think about it. No pressure." Grace read through the documents, her eyes widening. You're serious about this? Completely. I know you don't have time to actually work at the garage, but I want your input on business decisions, your name on the paperwork, your investment acknowledged as more than just a loan. I want it to be ours. Warren and Komicha, Grace said softly, understanding dawning. The co was always meant to be me. From the beginning, before I even knew how to ask for it, Grace set down the papers and kissed him, deep and long and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered, "Where do I sign?" They formalized the partnership in August with a small celebration at the garage. Carol came up from Millbrook, Grace's assistant flew in from Seattle, and a handful of their closest friends gathered to toast the newest development in their unlikely story. To taking chances, Grace said, raising her glass. To stopping when you see someone who needs help. To building something beautiful out of the most unexpected circumstances. To family, Luke added, however it comes together. That night, after everyone had left and Maddie was asleep in the car on the drive home, Grace turned to Luke with a question she'd been holding for months. Do you think Maddie would be okay with it if I officially became part of this family? Not just in spirit, but legally? Luke's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I want to adopt her, Luke. I want to be her mother, in every way that matters. I know I can never replace Sarah, and I wouldn't try to. But I love Maddie like she's my own, and I want it to be official. I want her to know she has two mothers who love her, one in heaven and one right here. Luke had to pull over because his eyes were too blurred with tears to drive safely. He turned to Grace, this woman who'd entered their lives in the most dramatic way possible and had stayed through every challenge, every complication, every moment of building something new. She would love that, he managed. She already calls you Grace Mom to her friends at school. Did you know that? She does? Yeah. I heard her on the phone with one of her classmates last week. I have to go, my Grace Mom is making dinner. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Grace started crying then, and Luke held her in the front seat of his truck on the side of the road while their daughter slept peacefully in the back, dreaming whatever 8-year-olds dream about. They told Maddie the next morning over pancakes. Her reaction was to leap from her chair and hug Grace so hard they both nearly fell over. Really? Really, really? You're going to be my official mom? If you want me to be, Grace said through tears. Want you to be? Are you kidding? This is the best thing ever. Wait until I tell Emma. She's going to be so jealous that I have the coolest mom in the entire world. The adoption process took several months, but in November, just over a year after Luke had found Grace on Highway 14, they stood in a courtroom with a judge who smiled as she declared Grace Lennox to be the legal parent of Maddie Warren. This is the best part of my job, the judge said. Families don't always come together in traditional ways, but that doesn't make them any less real. Congratulations to all three of you. Carol was there, crying happy tears and hugging Grace like she was her own daughter. Sarah would be so happy, she whispered. So happy. That evening, the three of them stood in the driveway of their house, the one they'd chosen together, the one that felt like home in ways no other place ever had. Maddie was between them, holding both their hands, chattering about how she was going to need new forms at school with Grace's name added to her emergency contacts. This is perfect, Maddie announced. Everything is exactly how it's supposed to be. Luke looked at Grace over their daughter's head and saw his own feelings reflected back at him. Gratitude, joy, the bone-deep satisfaction of knowing you're exactly where you belong. Yeah, he agreed. Everything is exactly how it's supposed to be. Later that night, after Maddie was asleep, Luke and Grace sat on their deck watching the stars. It was cold, winter was coming, but they didn't want to go inside yet. There was something about being out here in the darkness that made the important conversations easier. Do you ever think about that night? Grace asked. About how different everything would be if you'd taken a different route home, or if you'd been 5 minutes later, or if you'd decided not to stop. All the time, Luke admitted. How close we came to never knowing each other. How one decision changed everything. I think about it too. About how I almost died thinking I'd wasted my life on things that didn't matter. About how you gave me a second chance, not just to live, but to actually know what living means. Grace leaned against him. I don't believe in fate or destiny or any of that, but I believe in choice. You chose to stop that night. You chose to help. And every day since then, we've chosen each other. That's not fate. That's better. It's intention. Intention, Luke repeated, liking the word. Yeah, we're intentional about this. About us. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the distant sound of waves against the shore. Inside the house, their daughter slept safely. Behind them stood their home, their life, everything they'd built together from a single moment of kindness on a dark highway. I have something for you, Grace said suddenly, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a small frame and handed it to Luke. Inside was the letter she'd sent him 3 years ago, after paying for Maddie's surgery. The one that had lived in his wallet for so long, worn and creased from being read and reread during difficult moments. How did you... You left your wallet on the counter last week. I saw it and had a copy made. I wanted you to have a version that wasn't falling apart, but I also wanted to keep the original. Is that okay? Luke traced the words with his finger. I believe every child deserves a chance at life. You gave me a second chance at life, Grace said softly. Seems only fair that I gave you the means to give Maddie hers. We're connected, the three of us. We have been from the beginning, we just didn't know it yet. Luke set down the frame and pulled Grace close, kissing her with all the love and gratitude and hope he'd been carrying since that night on Highway 14. When they finally pulled apart, both a little breathless, Grace was smiling. What? Luke asked. I was just thinking about something Maddie said a while ago, about how adults make things complicated when they don't need to be. She was right. This, us, it's actually very simple. We love each other. We show up for each other. We choose each other every day. Everything else is just details. Out of the mouths of babes. Exactly. They went inside eventually, locking up the house and checking on Maddie one last time before heading to bed. Luke stood in the doorway of his daughter's room, watching her sleep, Grace's arm around his waist. We did good, Grace whispered. We did great, Luke corrected. In the morning, there would be work, the garage to run, meetings for Grace to attend, school drop-offs and homework, and all the mundane tasks that made up a life. But none of it felt like burden anymore. It all felt like privilege. The privilege of building something real, something lasting, something born from the simplest of acts, stopping to help someone in need. Luke had stopped on Highway 14 that night because it was the right thing to do, never imagining it would change his entire life. But standing here now, with Grace beside him and Maddie sleeping peacefully, he couldn't imagine any other path. Every choice, every challenge, every moment of fear and hope had led them here, to home, to family, to love that was earned and chosen and real. Warren & Company repairs opened every morning at 7, and by 8 o'clock there would be a line of cars waiting. Luke would work on engines and transmissions, solving problems and keeping people moving. Grace would split her time between the Portland office and occasional trips to Seattle, building her empire while never forgetting what truly mattered. And Maddie would grow up knowing she was loved by 3 parents, one in heaven who gave her life, and 2 on earth who chose to build a life together around the miracle of her. It wasn't a fairy tale. Real life never is. There were still hard days and arguments and moments of doubt, but through it all, they had each other. They had the memory of a dark highway and a choice to stop. They had the gratitude that came from second chances. They had the family they'd built from the wreckage of trauma and the foundation of kindness. And in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything.